Six heroes corner a black-winged angel named Lufasu as they declare an end to her dominance. One of the heroes slashes his sword through her as they then prepare a seal for her. Lufasu suddenly started praising the heroes, and that maybe they can even win against someone named Efreet. The whole thing is then revealed to be a video game, and that Lufasu was actually the avatar of a boy. Sorry to crush all of your dreams of having a waifu protagonist. Anyways, the boy then starts explaining the game's details, which I'm just not going to get into, but the important part is when he talks about the novel system, which is a system in the game where the actions made by players can be incorporated into the main storyline of the game. Lufasu was an avatar the boy created, and he would use her to invade and conquer every other country in the game to create one single country ruled by him. However, the players decided that having one country isn't very interesting since they can't use the war system anymore. So the boy and the other high-level players discussed with each other, and they decided to divide the forces to two, with one side being ruled by the supreme leader Lufasu, and the other side being led by the heroes. Lufasu ended up losing the war, and the event was officially registered into the game's storyline via the novel system. The boy prepares to close the game and go to bed, but then he notices a woman on the login screen, offering him a new role. The boy identifies the woman as the goddess Venesu, and the one that created the game world. The boy decides to accept the role, and he presses the yes button. The boy blacks out, and he suddenly starts hearing voices, asking if the hero summoning succeeded. However, the voices then began to panic, as they realize that they've accidentally released the seal on the supreme ruler. The boy opens his eyes to find himself in a throne room with everyone trembling and lowering their heads at him. The boy looks in a nearby mirror, and he realized that he has somehow turned into Lufasu, which is also going to be what I'm going to be calling him from now on. Lufasu began to question how this even happened Anyways, Lufasu does the sensible thing that I'm sure many of you would do, and acknowledges how wrong it is for him to be transformed into a woman, and that there is no way she can be smashed. Lufasu decides to get an understanding of the situation by asking everyone in the room. However, when she opens her mouth to speak, a menacing aura is released from her body, which causes everyone to fall to the ground. Lufasu is confused on why her tone changed, and she continued to ask more questions, but what she says would keep on being misinterpreted. Lufasu is confused on what to do, but she realized that it was all because of a skill from the angel race called overpowering. She turns off the skill, and everyone in the room is lifted from the immense pressure. One of the people panics in the fact that he revived the supreme ruler, and Lufasu identifies him as an elf, and asks him for an explanation on what's going on. The elf explained to her that after 200 years, they still haven't dealt with the demon lord Efreet, so they decided to try to summon a hero, but they ended up summoning Lufasu by accident. Lufasu comes to the realization that this world takes place 200 years after the events of the game. She starts to feel bad for everyone in the throne room for frightening them, so she intends on telling them that she means no harm to them. She tells everyone that she doesn't plan on doing anything to this world, and that she had already tasted defeat and was satisfied with that fight. However, she's still bothered by the fact that the people who defeated her couldn't manage to defeat Efreet, but right now, she is not the supreme ruler and is just a girl who got her dreams crushed. She then takes off and flies away from the castle. Lufasu is excited at the fact that she's flying, and she starts to contemplate on why she was sent to this world. But she is also excited, since she is inside of her favorite game, and became the character she created. However, she's still going to try to find a way to get back home, as she wonders where she'll go first. She suddenly spots a large tower in the distance, which turned out to be her base. She landed on the top of the tower and went inside, revealing a large throne room. She starts feeling nostalgic, even though it should technically be her first time here, and she suddenly gets a flashback to her sitting at a table with a bunch of other people. Lufasu is confused on what those memories are, but she suddenly notices somebody hiding around the corner. A young girl walks out, and her face brightens up when she spots Lufasu. She runs up to her and asks if it's really her, and Lufasu is left wondering who the girl is. Lufasu asks the girl who she is, much to the girl's shock. The girl then calls Lufasu cruel, and she reminds her that she is her advisor Dina, and that she has been waiting in the tower for Lufasu for 200 years. Lufasu is confused since she doesn't remember someone named Dina in her troops, but she suddenly remembers that she had stationed a random NPC girl and gave her the setting of Lufasu's advisor. Lufasu realized that she has to be more assertive, and she apologizes to Dina and thanks her for her services. Dina bows down and says that she's not worthy of such praise. Dina asks Lufasu how she was able to return, and Lufasu told her that she got summoned by mistake by a king who wanted to summon a hero. Lufasu then asked Dina about what happened after she left, and Dina told her that the 7 heroes who defeated her each started a country of their own, and 4 of the 7 have already passed away from old age, but 3 that have a longer lifespan are still alive. Lufasu then wonders if the 7 heroes are also players, and she asks Dina if there's anything else. Dina tells her that the Demon King Efreet is still in good condition, and that the 12 stars of heaven are also all still alive. Dina says she was able to track down half of them, and 2 of them joined Efreet to get revenge on the humans for defeating Lufasu. Lufasu then explains that the 12 stars of heaven are NPCs that can be called friendly monsters, and Lufasu mastered the skill Monster Tamer, which she used to tame boss monsters that only appeared once in official events, and she made the 12 strongest ones generals under her direct supervision. Lufasu is irritated that they are causing trouble, and she says that she'll have to scold them. She then sets an objective to find out if the 3 remaining heroes are also players, and to also recover the 12 stars of heaven if they're acting stupid. Dina informs Lufasu that the closest location to them is the Suval country, with one of the 7 heroes Migres being inside. Then inside the nearby volcano is the Castle of the Dragon, where one of the 12 stars of heaven, Ares the Ram, is located, and that Ares is currently preparing for the invasion of Suval. Lufasu decided that Suval will be the next location that she is headed to. Lufasu is about to leave, but Dina tells her to wait, and she informs Lufasu that her face is too well known. Lufasu counteracts this by saying that it was 200 years ago, and no one would remember her in a world without photos, but Dina calls her naive, since races like the elves have longer lifespans, so they would still clearly remember her. Dina then suggests Lufasu to get a job where the social status and background of a person doesn't matter. And that's how they settled on an adventurer job, just like literally every other iSky fantasy manga out there. Lufasu ended up accepting a commission that required her to exterminate some orcs that have built a nest near a village and have been kidnapping young women and stealing their food. Dina says that the goddess is probably grieving over creating things that are such failures, and she begs Lufasu to quickly get rid of the orcs. Lufasu then revealed that she still has all of her stats that she had from the game, and I'm just going to put them on the screen, since I don't feel like listing them all out. Lufasu can easily deal with the orcs due to her stats being maxed out, but the problem is whether or not she can actually withstand the sight of blood from killing something for the first time. Lufasu then uses one of her skills, Transmutation, to create a bunch of flying swords, which she hurls at the orcs guarding the entrance, killing them in an instant. Lufasu found the aftermath to be gross, and stated that the game is definitely an 18+. However, she is confused as to why her emotions haven't been stirred at all at the sight of this. Suddenly, an entire horde of orcs appear and charges at Lufasu. However, she found their movements to be way too slow, and she ended up easily killing the orcs. She then stormed through the entire lair, killing every single orc without even batting an eye. Dina then teleports the orcs' corpses with her special teleportation magic. She sent the corpses back to the tower to process into meat. Lufasu then uses her transmutation skill to create a giant arm, which she uses to smash the entire lair, since the orcs sent would have called for other orcs. Lufasu and Dina return to the village, and they're handed their reward money. However, the villagers are still concerned on whether or not more monsters would show up, and whether they'd have enough money to pay for more commissions. Lufasu overhears them, and she uses her transmutation skill to create a golem to defend the village. She then swiftly leaves the scene, as she departs for the country Suval. We then fast forward to Lufasu and Dina arriving in Suval. Dina asks Lufasu where they're headed first, and Lufasu said she would like to meet Migres. However, she would need to gather some information first, since there is still a lot to this world that she doesn't know about. Dina suggests they go to the library since it would be the most suitable place to fill up on Lufasu's lack of knowledge, and Lufasu agrees. They ask a local where the library is, and he offers to guide them halfway there. He then introduces himself as Gantz, a mercenary protecting the borders. Dina asked Gantz if he could tell them more about the country, and he explains that Suvil is a stronghold protected by a lake, and it's divided into 5 areas, which I'm not gonna list out, but it's up on the screen for you. Someone suddenly calls for Gantz and tells him that his break is over and to get back to his post. Gantz bears the duo farewell and takes off. Lufasu then takes a look at his stats with one of her skills, and she finds them to be extremely low, and asks Dina if he was a novice mercenary. However, Dina tells her that the standards for fighting now are much lower than the ones from 200 years ago. She tells Lufasu that you'd only have one life, so getting to level 1000 without losing your life is a seemingly impossible task. Lufasu then realized that she was able to achieve it because it was a game, so she was able to resurrect over and over again whenever she died. Dina then informs Lufasu that they've arrived at the library and the duo heads inside. Lufasu is surprised to find a lot of books inside the library actually talking about her in a positive light, and Dina asked her if she was surprised that she isn't hated that much, since the people under her control didn't have to fear any demons, unlike now. Lufasu then reads a book about her history, and it discusses how the humans rejected Lufasu, but they ended up pleasing the demons as a result of their biggest threat being taken care of. The 7 heroes rose an army of novices to fight against the demons, but they had lost their union due to the battle against Lufasu, so they ended up losing to the demons. As a result, 60% of the world became the demons' territory, and humanity currently controls around 30% of the world. The 7 heroes have been reduced to 3, with the 3 maintaining a temporary peace, and it wouldn't be surprising if the world were to suddenly collapse. Lufasu is shocked to learn that the world is on the verge of destruction. Suddenly, an earthquake begins shaking the entire library. Lufasu asks Dina how frequent earthquakes are in the country, and she tells Lufasu that they're very rare. Lufasu then remembers her giving the power to create earthquakes to a certain sheep, and she tells Dina that he is most likely coming. The scene then cuts over to Gantz at the front gate, as the soldiers have to push back the enemy until the main army arrives from the castle. The earthquake from earlier was meant to be a declaration of war, as he would imitate it from his master. That he being one of the 12 stars of heaven, Ares, with his level sitting at 800. Meanwhile, in the castle, someone informs Migres of Ares' attack and begs him to protect everyone. Migres responds by saying that he'll attack him with Revia. Meanwhile, Lufasu uses her transmutation skill to create a floating platform, and she launches herself and Dina towards the battlefield. We then see a flashback of when Lufasu first met Ares when he was just a small rainbow sheep. She asked him if he was crying, and told him what was the point of those tears, since he should be using his time to steal back rather than cry over being robbed. Ares then bites her arm in a fit of rage, and Lufasu tells him to come with her, and that they'll become stronger together.
End of flashback.
The scene then cuts to Gantz and the other soldiers struggling. One of the monsters suddenly slices his leg, and Gantz's life starts flashing before his eyes. But he is suddenly saved by some water, as Migres has finally arrived on the battlefield, sitting on a wheelchair. The soldiers rejoice, as Migres then unleashes this water dragon thing named Levia, and ordered it to exterminate the monsters. Levia creates a bunch of spears using water, and it pierces every single monster with them. Lufasu is observing the battle from afar, and she uses her observing eye skill to look at Levia's stats. She concludes that Levia has a chance of winning against Ares, since his attribute is fire, and Levia's is water, and Migres is also in the battle, and he is level 1000, just like Lufasu. However, when Lufasu looks at Migres' stats, she discovered that he lost half of his level and stats, and lost several classes. He also had some weird debuffs on him as well. Dina tells Lufasu that there was a rumor that Migres got cursed, and she said that after being defeated by Efreet, it was rumored that the 7 heroes got cursed, and they got in a state where they're only able to manifest half of their original strength, which means that Migres needs to win against Ares without losing Levia. Dina suddenly informs Lufasu that Ares has arrived on the battlefield. He prepares to launch a fire attack, and Migres tells everyone to get behind him, as Ares unleashes his skill Mizaltim, which will inflict constant damage simply by touch. Migres was able to intercept the attack with a tidal wave, but Ares dodged it by leaping into the air, But Migres sent Livia after him, with Livia managing to entangle Ares, and the people start cheering for its victory. However, Migres is panicking, as the water vapor on Livia is being evaporated with no way to recover, as he realized that it was Ares' true plan from the start, but it was too late to back up now. Dina asked Lufasu what she thought of the battle, and she tells her that Livia has the advantage, and that it would win the battle. However, Ares' true objective is to decrease Livia's max HP, weakening it for the next battle. Lufasu acknowledges that Ares has become very crafty, and Dina responds by saying that it was Lufasu who taught Ares how to fight like that. Lufasu mentions how rainbow sheep are meant to be peaceful monsters, but Ares would constantly invade because of the heroes defeating Lufasu, and that's exactly why she has to stop him. Lufasu and Dina suddenly leap off the platform they were standing on. Lufasu apologizes to Ares and tells him that she's not looking for revenge, and that she also never ordered him to carry out revenge for her, as she then kicks him in the face, while telling him to cool off. Lufasu then turns to Migres and tells him that he seems to be struggling, and that she'll give him a hand. Migres is stunned after hearing her voice, as he seemed to have figured out Lufasu's identity. He suddenly tells Lufasu to wait, and informs her that there seems to be someone pulling the strings, and they're using Ares' desire for revenge. He tells her that if she is who he thinks she is, then be careful. Lufasu then takes off to confront Ares, since I guess she managed to kick him back 1,000 feet or something. Lufasu then recounts how Ares is actually the first of the 12 stars of heaven she met, and she suddenly refers to him as a crying sheep. However, Lufasu gets confused by this, since she doesn't remember a crying sheep in the game, and it's just like what happened earlier, where unknown memories would suddenly appear in her head. She then comes to the conclusion that perhaps the original Lufasu's memories are merging with hers. Lufasu finally arrives at Ares' location, and he asks her who she is. Lufasu suddenly releases her aura and takes off her disguise. Ares is in disbelief and says that Lufasu has died, and he calls her a phantom and tells her to disappear. Lufasu then suggests to test whether or not she's the real deal with their bodies, and I know what you're thinking, but she tells Ares to come at her and show her how much he's grown in the past 200 years. Ares charges at her with his full force, but Lufasu easily stops the attack and calls him cute, as she proceeds to lift him up with only one arm. She then slams Ares into the ground, and she tells him that he doesn't need to hold back. Ares then unleashes all of his fire power, but Lufasu was able to easily block the attack, and she tells him that she's going to pat him for 200 years worth of patting, as she then proceeds to slam Ares back into the ground. She then raises her fist to deliver one final punch. She then approaches a battered-up Ares and tells him to come with her. A flash of light suddenly envelopes Ares, and a girl suddenly drops down from the sky. The girl then embraces Lufasu's boingers and starts crying. Lufasu then notices that the girl has rainbow shiny hair, and she realized that the girl is somehow Ares. We flash back to Lufasu when she first caught Ares, and chatting with the players of the 7 heroes. She asked them what the design for Ares should be, and one of the players, Mafahl, suggested to make him look like a beautiful girl. Lufasu tells him that Ares is a guy, but Mafahl responds that they're currently living in an age of traps. And honestly, he's not wrong at all. And that is basically the story of how Ares ended up looking like a cute girl, something that Lufasu regrets. And I bet some of you are mouthing inside, since he's no longer smashable. Lufasu asked Ares if he's calmed down, and he responds yes. She then takes a look at his stats, which I'm not going to bother reading all of that out. Lufasu tells Ares that she's on a trip to take back all the 12 stars of heaven, and that Ares is the first one, and she asks Ares to come with her. Ares realized that he's the first once again, and he starts crying tears of joy. He embraces Lufasu and agrees to come with her. He then acknowledges Dina's existence, stating that he does not recognize her, much to Dina's shock. Dina teleports in front of Ares, and irritatingly asks him if he really doesn't remember her. She then reminds him that she was the one who always stood behind Lufasu. Ares suddenly realizes that Dina is the low-profile person who blended in with the background, which Dina felt insulted by. Lufasu then tells Ares she has something to ask him, and asks him why he invaded Suval. Ares responds that he couldn't forgive the humans who betrayed Lufasu, and that one of the heroes was idolized for it. Lufasu suddenly remembers that Migres had told her earlier that there was someone else pulling the string behind Ares. She then questions Ares about it, and Ares begins to stutter. Lufasu tells Ares that she's not looking for vengeance, and that's why she can't forgive anyone who abuses those feelings of hers. Ares then confesses that a demon from the 7 luminaries called Mars would come to him in a few hundred years, whispering things to him every day. The demon would request for them to take down Suval together and get revenge for Lufasu. Lufasu is confused on who the 7 luminaries are, and Dina explained to her that they are the names given to the 7 demon generals who formed around 80 years ago, and that they are the strongest demons, not counting the demon Lord Efreet and his son. We then cut to a demon standing before an army of monsters and rejoicing at the fact that the water dragon Levia has been drastically weakened and that Suval will finally fall. The demon is then revealed to be Mars, the 7 luminary of fire. Mars then plans to use the fall of Suval and the defeat of one of the 7 heroes to become the most trusted member of the 7 luminaries in Efreet's eyes. However, he starts to get worried since Ares is late, and he wonders what he's currently doing. Something suddenly shakes the ground, as Mars looks over and sees something slam into the ground. He sees Lufasu, and is shocked that a human has somehow defeated all of his elite monsters. Mars asks Lufasu who she is, and she responds by asking if he's one of the 7 luminaries. Someone should tell her that you shouldn't answer a question with a question, but I digress. Mars ignores her question because she ignored his. He notices rainbow hair behind Lufasu and asks if the person is Ares. Mars asks Ares what he thinks he's doing and questions why he's with a human. Mars reminds him about his grudge against the humans and asks whether or not he wanted revenge for his master. Ares tells Mars to not misunderstand him and that he still can't forgive the humans and the 7 heroes, but the people rejoicing after his revenge will not be Lufasu, but Mars and the demons. He tells Mars that he'll no longer help the demons, and that he'll stop him right here and now. Mars says that Ares was his trump card against Levia, so he patiently waited, and now he has no more use for him. He then laughs at Ares, telling him that he has no chance of survival by making an enemy of the demons, since he's going against Efreet. Mars then claims that he'll personally dispose of Ares. Ares attempts to fight back, but his wounds still haven't healed from the fight with Levia. Lufasu tells Ares to stand behind her, and that she'll fight Mars in his stead. Mars tells her that it's cool that she cares so much for her friend, but questions whether or not she is able to beat one of the 7 luminaries. He then unleashes his attack and starts going on this boring and egotistical monologue while dashing around the battlefield instead of just attacking Lufasu head-on for some reason. Lufasu then tells Mars to shut up as she punches Mars into oblivion.
That was easy.
As Mars is sent flying away, he manages to get a good look at Lufasu and realizes that he was actually fighting against Lufasu Mafahl. Lufasu is surprised that someone who is considered to be a general is so weak, and his level should be around 300. Dina explains to her that although humanity lost against the demons also suffered casualties, and that they lost almost all of their powerful demons. Lufasu comes to the realization that currently in this world, the demon Lord Efreet is the only one who is able to stand up to her. Lufasu then returned to Migres and told him how she casually defeated Ares and Mars from the 7 luminaries. Migres then comes to a realization, and he invites Lufasu and Ares to his residence, much to Ares' annoyance. Also gotta love how he completely ignored Dina's existence. When they arrive back at the city, they are greeted by the city lords, who Lufasu compared to orcs in clothes. They started telling Migres to be careful, since he is way more important than those peasants from the commerce area. Migres asked Lufasu if she was shocked that the people at the top who were supposed to protect everyone else can only think about themselves. Lufasu asked Migres if that was what he wanted to show her, and Migres confirmed it, saying that he wanted her to see the proof of his mistake. The group finally arrived at Migres' house, and he asked Lufasu if she would show him her face. Lufasu took off her disguise, revealing her identity, which Migres had already figured out. Lufasu has completed one of her objectives by finding Migres, and all that's left is for her to check whether or not he is also a player like her. She begins to greet him, However, she is then left shocked by the scared expression on his face. Lufasu realized that Migres is a resident of this world, and that's why he looks at her with such fear and regret, since he would have known that the fight between Lufasu and the 7 heroes was all staged. Migres asked Lufasu why she returned to this world after so long, and if it was to sneer at them for falling so low. Lufasu then talks about all the books criticizing the 7 heroes in the library, and she asked him if he was the one who wrote them. She then asked Migres if he felt guilty by allowing the demons to invade by defeating her. Lufasu tells him that it's fine to feel proud for winning, and that the Migres she knows would follow the path he thinks is right, and that even though she lost the battle, she does not have any regrets about it. Migres is confused and asked why she didn't have a grudge against the 7 heroes, since Lufasu had everything under control until it was ruined by their betrayal. However, all of that to Lufasu was simply just a game, so she doesn't actually feel anything. So she decided to just reply with some random answer and told Migres that the people revolted since she was not worthy enough to be their leader, and that the heroes standing up to her shows that her abilities are lacking, so she doesn't have any reason to hate him. Lufasu then tells Migres to stop blaming himself, and that he's so pitiful now that she can't even look at him anymore, and he's meant to be the hero for all the people in this country. Migres then thinks back to 200 years ago, when he and all the heroes and Lufasu were hanging out together. Migres said that he thought elves are way too shut in, and that his dream is to someday build a country where elves can live proudly. Lufasu then told him that if his dream was to build a country, then hers would be to conquer the world, and that she'll build him an ideal country where no one would have to fear the demons. The others heroes then started laughing, and Lufasu started asking if something was funny. They told her that it's way too big of a dream, and one of them named Aliot says that if she manages to do it, then he'll eat pasta in one go with his nose. Lufasu holds his word for it, and tells him that she'll definitely make him eat pasta with his nose once she conquers the world. Migres smiles at this flashback, and he thanks Lufasu, and tells her that he'll do his best to follow her advice. Lufasu then helps Migres by healing up Livia from the damage she took from Ares. Migres then asks Lufasu where she'll be headed next, and she tells him that she's going to be taking back all the 12 stars of heaven. Dina tells Lufasu that the next location would be the royal tomb of the Black Wings, which is where the scales of the 12 stars of heaven, Libra, is guarding the tomb. Lufasu says that the name sounds awfully like her grave, and Dina tells her that's because it actually is her grave, and that was built around 190 years ago by her worshippers, and it's the largest building in the world with 108 layers. Libra is at the top of the tomb, protecting all of Lufasu's treasures she had before she died. Migres said that he heard that Libra has been disposing of anyone who comes close to the top of the tomb, and Lufasu asked him if there was a reason for people to plunder her grave. Migres tells her that the legendary weapons stored inside her tomb could help with humanity's comeback, and he requests that Lufasu leave the one she won't use in the tomb, to which she agrees to. Migres tells Lufasu that he'd like to give her something as an apology, and he asks her if her current appearance makes it hard to move around. He then gives her a brand new outfit and, goddamn. Migres then sent Lufasu off on her way, and told her to have a good trip, which Lufasu smiled at. We then transition over to where Mars had landed after that punch. He trembles at the fact that Lufasu Mafahl, the only person that the demons fear, has returned. He's suddenly found by a mysterious person who is surprised that he's still alive. That person regards Mars as a declared dead chess piece coming back alive, and that no one would profit from this kind of filler. Mars seemingly recognizes the person, and they tell him that once his role is done, he should leave, since it's the rule of the game. They then kill Mars, and bids him farewell, while referring to him as a pitiful NPC. And is it just me, or does that silhouette look really familiar? The scene then shifts over to Libra of the 12 stars of heaven, as she begins a countdown. A group of adventurers plead with her, telling her that they haven't come to fight, and that they need the loot from the tomb to help humanity fight against the demons. However, Libra doesn't give a shit, and she proceeds to use one of her skills, Brachium, and kills all of the adventurers. We then cut over to Lufasu's gang, who are all riding in a camper van, which turned out to be a golem created by Lufasu. They finally arrive at the tomb, which for some reason has a whole town built around it. Dina explains that a lot of adventurers hoping to conquer the tomb gather here, which caused a lot of merchants to gather as well, and the whole place essentially became a village. Ares is enraged that all these people have gathered together to loot Lufasu's grave, and he gets ready to take everyone down. However, Lufasu tells him to stop, since she is still alive, and that place is not her grave, so she doesn't actually care if it gets raided. Ares calms down, and Lufasu wonders if all the 12 heavenly stars are like that. The group arrive at the very crowded entrance, and Dina asks a fellow adventurer if something has happened. The guy tells her that a special scout party was dispatched 2 months ago, but today, they haven't sent in their regular report yet. Dina asks Lufasu what she thinks of the situation, and she speculates that Libra has most likely gotten to them, which Ares agrees to. Lufasu then gives us some lore exposition dump on Libra, and she explains how she is the strongest golem to exist in the game thanks to the help of one of the 7 heroes, the Dwarf King Mazal. Lufasu knows that the scout party won't stand a chance against Libra, and that humanity's strength will be decreased even more. She then realizes that she will have to take down Libra herself. Lufasu's gang prepares to go inside the tomb, but the adventurer tells them that going inside would be suicide. Lufasu thanks him for being concerned, but she tells him that he doesn't need to worry, as her group enters the tomb. Ares creates a fire for the group to see with his skill, and they spot something looming in the darkness. It turned out to be a golem, one of the mass-produced ones created by Lufasu during the final battle with the 7 heroes. The golem doesn't feel any hostility towards the group, since it still sees Lufasu as its master, and its AI was programmed to see her and the rest of Lufasu's gang as its allies. However, the golem suddenly attacks Dina, and she is confused on why she's the only one being targeted, as she pleads for Lufasu to save her. Lufasu retorts that Dina's presence is so weak that even a regular golem forgot about her. Lufasu prepares to save Dina, but a group of adventurers called the Hawk Eyes suddenly show up, as they reassure Dina that they'll save her and take on the golem. Lufasu looks at their stats and the stats of the golem, and she realizes that they won't stand a chance. She then commands Ares, who proceeded to take out the golem in a single hit. The adventurer was very impressed, and asked the little miss how he managed to do that. Lufasu asked him to calm down, and that he's scaring Ares. She also adds that Ares is a boy, and the adventurer has the same reaction that the audience also had when they found out. The group of adventurers introduced themselves as a warrior class and the leader Jean, a light warrior Nick, a heavy warrior Richard, and an archer Shu. Now make sure you jot down these names, because they're not going to be important at all. Lufasu introduces herself as Sufalu, a wandering merchant and a ranger class. Dina and Ares then copies her introduction and says pretty much the same thing. Jean notes that their party is very unbalanced and asks if they're okay, which Lufasu takes insult to. She then reassures him and says that their levels are very high, and Jean takes that as them being a muscle-brained party despite their gorgeous appearances, and Lufasu gets even more pissed. Jean then reassures Lufasu and told her that his party will accompany them from this point, and Lufasu regards them as unwanted help. Lufasu was about to reject the offer, but Dina interjects and accepts it. Dina then tells Lufasu that they should use what they can use, and that the adventurers are the one who chose to tag along. Lufasu realized that Dina wants the adventurers to act like a tank, and it's not a bad strategy, but it's against her good conscience, and that they'll just pretend to beat monsters by cooperation while it's actually just her and Ares doing all the work. The group arrive at floor 106 of the tomb, which Jean was not expecting to get to in just a few days. He then boasts about their strength, but Nick tells him to not let his guard down. The group suddenly stumbles upon a pile of corpses, which they realized was the scouting party. Nick theorizes that they fought against the golems, but it ended up with a double KO, but Lufasu doesn't believe it, since the golem they faced is a level 600, and the highest level golem she's ever made. She theorizes that the group sacrificed their lives so that they friends can go on to the top. However, she realized that the golem is also dead. She comes to the realization that since golems can't recover HP, the 200 years of damage must have built up and worn it out. Jean's party prepares to get to the top floor and defeat Libra, but Lufasu tells them to stay put. Jean asks if she's planning on going in by herself, and that it's reckless. Lufasu told him that she's the only one here who can survive Libra's first attack, and Jean questions who she is. He recounts how she crushed the golems so that they wouldn't fight them, and she talks if she also knew Libra personally. Lufasu asks him why she should answer him, with a menacing glare, as she then proceeds to climb the stairs to the final floor. Dina and Ares stays behind, since neither of their HP reaches 10,000. Lufasu enters the final room, as a voice identifies her as an intruder and gives her 10 seconds to leave. The voice reveals themselves to be Libra of the scales from the 12 heavenly stars, and says that she'll use force to remove the intruder. Lufasu removes her disguise, leaving Libra in complete shock. Libra scans Lufasu and found a 99.999899965% chance of her being the real Lufasu. However, she also found the probability of her surviving the battle against the heroes to be less than 1%. The contrasting percentages causes Libra to malfunction. Lufasu tells Libra that she's going to go over and repair her. However, Libra warns her that if Lufasu comes any closer, and she will attack. However, Lufasu doesn't care, and proceeds to take another step, asking if Libra was going to stop her. Libra then unleashes her skill and attacks Lufasu with her move Brachium. The attack hurts Lufasu, and she feels the burning heat from it. Her HP starts drastically decreasing. However, an attack of this level at the end of the day is nothing for Lufasu. She easily withstands to attack, shocking Libra. She then gets in front of Libra's face, and Libra attempts to slash her. However, Lufasu easily blocks the attack as she then touches Libra and proceeds to heal her. Dina then rescans Lufasu and determines the odds of her being real is at 100%. She then proceeds to terminate the mission of guarding the royal tomb, as she collapses into Lufasu's chest. Lufasu then wonders how she'll explain everything to Jean's party. She brings Libra downstairs, and Ares greets her. She then notices that Jean's entire party have on blank expressions. She asks Dina what happened, and Dina explains to her that she planted fake memories inside of them to make them think that they were the ones who cleared the dungeon. That way, no attention would be drawn to Lufasu. Lufasu asks Dina if that was her plan from the beginning, and Dina asks her why else would she want to bring such an obvious hindrance with them. Lufasu's party reached the top floor, and they gathered the treasures that they needed, while leaving the rest for the humans. The party rests at a nearby forest, however Libra is not waking up. Dina suggests Lufasu to order her to get up. Lufasu orders Libra to wake up, and Libra begins to move. She stands up and greets Lufasu a good morning, as Lufasu takes a look at all her stats. Libra looks over at Dina and calls her an unknown person and that it's nice to meet her. Lufasu tells Libra that Dina is her advisor, but Libra questions it and says that Dina has such a powerful stealth nature that not even her memory can save it down, which upsets Dina. Dina then gets in front of Libra's face, hoping to jog her memory, but Libra still does not remember Dina. However, she did find a chunk of data that has been damaged after 200 years, so the data about Dina is probably inside that chunk. Lufasu tells Libra that she is on a mission to recover all the 12 heavenly stars, and that she is the second one. Lufasu tells Libra to use her power for Lufasu, and to come with her on her mission. Libra tells Lufasu that she'll accompany Lufasu on her journey, as she joins Lufasu's party. Lufasu asks Dina where they're going next, and Dina tells her that they'll be headed around 2,000 kilometers to the west across the sea. She says that at the base of the mountain at that location, Parthenos of the Maiden has made a small village, and is currently living a secluded life there. Lufasu questions Dina about this, and Dina tells her that Parthenos has made a barrier for weak monsters and plants to live in without having to fear the enemies outside. Lufasu realizes that what Parthenos is doing is fairly normal, and that it's nice to have some members of the 12 heavenly stars not cause trouble for others. However, Dina tells her that the mountain Parthenos settled in is Lufasu's hometown, and that she kicked out all of the native Skywing that once lived there. Lufasu immediately takes back what she said after hearing this. Ares asks Dina where all the Skywings are staying after being kicked out, and Dina says that they're all currently living in the country Gillerhorn, made by Merak, one of the 7 heroes. Lufasu realized that they would have to choose the 12 heavenly stars, or the 7 heroes. She takes into consideration that the capital of Gjellerhorn is closer, and that there's also a chance that Merak is a player as well. So she orders the rest of her party that meeting the 7 heroes is also an objective of her journey, and that they'd be headed towards Jallarhorn first. Lufasu's party arrives at Jallarhorn, and they notice that every single building is built on the rock surfaces, and that the towns seem to be white on one side and black on the other. Lufasu calls Merak an idiot for building it like this, and she asks Dina if she knows anything about any of this. Dina tells Lufasu that the country seems to be split up between 2 factions, and that there is a light civil war between the 2 of them. She tells Lufasu that one faction is the traditional faction, who are in belief that pure white wings are the pride of the Skywing race, and that any other colored wings are inferior. The other faction are those who oppose those beliefs, and are comprised of mixed colored wings. Now, why does that scenario sound so familiar? Anyways, Lufasu asks Dina about Merak's stance on this, and Dina tells her that Merak is neutral in this whole conflict and is trying to stop it, but he can't seem to hold back the emotions of his people. Dina explains that the Skywing race would bully those with different colored wings, and that it has gotten even worse since Lufasu's disappearance. Lufasu realized that she could have been the source of this dispute. She then explains that it doesn't matter how ugly a Skywing is. If their wings are white, then they will be popular, and the opposite applies to the other colored wings. Since Lufasu was so powerful, she was also seen as a monster by the public. Lufasu knew the background of her character when choosing it, but she stuck with it anyways, since she thought it was cool. Ares asked Dina about the fact that Lufasu had banned discrimination in the past during her rule, which Dina confirms, confusing Lufasu, since this wasn't something from the game, and Lufasu starts to wonder whether or not there were things about Lufasu that she didn't even know about. Lufasu stated that Merak was someone who was able to read the mood and take care of others inside the game, and that if someone like him can't suppress this dispute, then the situation must be very serious. She also thought about how she was the cause for the conflict, so she can't just gloss over this situation. Dina asked Lufasu whether they'll go to the white or black side, and Lufasu answers black. Dina tells Lufasu that she should take extra caution with her disguise, since Skywings are a long-lived race, with a lifespan of around 1,500 years, and most of them would most likely remember Lufasu's face. Dina asks Lufasu how they'll get inside the town, and she states that she knows that there are stairs, but they're pointlessly long and slanted since everyone living in it can fly, so no one really uses the stairs. Dina panics and tells Lufasu that she really doesn't want to climb those stairs, and Libra tells her to calm down, since she will carry everyone inside. She then equips a jetpack and carries everyone in the air, with Lufasu panicking. The party crash-landed into the town, with all the townspeople questioning who they are. Dina apologizes for making such a racket that late, and says that they're just wandering merchants, which the townspeople all immediately buy. Lufasu's party checks into an inn and head to bed. Lufasu suddenly starts to dream about her character's childhood. She saw herself get scolded by her father for hitting the neighbor's children, and Lufasu defended herself by saying that they started it by throwing stones at her. However, her father tells her to shut up, as he proceeds to beat her, while telling her that he doesn't remember raising her like that. Lufasu retorts that of course he doesn't remember, since he never raised her from the start, and all he ever did was yell at her and abuse her. She then sees Lufasu's father and family living inside a mansion, while Lufasu is living inside of a small shed outside. She curses the god of creation for having her feel all of this, just for having different colored wings. She then sees a scene of her mother caressing her, as it then pans to Lufasu running away, angry that the god has made this world so unfair, and that she has to suffer like this. She then determines that no one in this world would help her, and that's why she decided to become stronger than everyone else, and that she'll save her mom from her miserable life. She then vows that she'll take all the unfairness and unreasonable things in the world, and mow them all down without leaving a single one behind. Lufasu suddenly wakes up, being confused on what she just saw. Libra came over to check on her, surprising Lufasu, and she asks Libra what she's doing there, and she responds that guarding her mistress is her duty. Libra tells Lufasu that her pulse was raising, and Lufasu reassures Libra, telling her that she simply saw an old dream. She then recalls all of the memories she has had since coming to this world, and realized that those are all the real Lufasu's memories. However, the only one inhabiting Lufasu's body is her, and she starts to wonder what happened to the real Lufasu's soul. We then flash over to the Demon King's castle, where the 7 luminaries are holding a meeting. One of them asks about the status of Mars, and another replies that he's probably dead, since the monsters he's in charge of in Ares are all missing. Another member questions if Ares killed him, and another member laughs, stating that even if Mars was the weakest member of the 7 luminaries, to be killed by someone from the 12 heavenly stars is a big disgrace to the demons. Another member asks the demon where she's been this whole time, and she says that she was conversing with the person who killed Mars. A member asks her who it was, and she says that she remembers the person having a pair of black wings on her back and is also very beautiful. The members all get scared, as they realize that the black wings could mean that the person is Lufasu Mafahl. They panic since Lufasu was the only being the Demon King feared, and if she really is alive, then it would be really bad for the demons. They ask the member if they were able to grasp Lufasu's movements, and she replies that Lufasu is currently in Gellerhorn. One of the other members tells another member named Jupiter to cooperate with the girl and to report anything that they find. They say that they will be expecting good things from the girl, referring to her as Venus. Meanwhile, back at Gellerhorn, someone is excited that the time has finally come, and they tell Lufasu to wait for them to present the heads of the heroes before her. It's the next day, and Lufasu tells everyone that they'll be going sightseeing for today, and that she'll allow everyone to roam around freely. However, she tells everyone to not cause any problems, and Dina states that she wants to go over to the White Wings area. Lufasu personally would rather meet up with Merak as fast as possible and determine whether or not he's an actual player, but Dina said that it would be quite difficult to see him right now. Ares gets Lufasu's attention and asks if she was trying to gather the 12 heavenly stars, which Lufasu confirms. Ares said that in that case, then he has some information for her. He tells Lufasu that Ego Karos of the Goat from the 12 heavenly stars had invited Ares to go with him to the demon race's place, so he is most likely working with the demons. Lufasu figures that she'll probably have to capture him immediately. However, Ares says that he has no idea where he is now. With that in mind, Lufasu begins wandering around the city, and she stumbles upon a black temple. She heads in and spots a statue of herself, weirding her out. Someone suddenly approaches Lufasu, asking if she's a traveler, since she seemed very surprised when she saw the statue. Lufasu is interested in the fact that the temple is worshipping the supreme ruler, and the guy says that Lufasu would seem like an evil aggressor to the outside world. However, she is the revered savior to them. Lufasu figured that if she listened to the man, then she could perhaps figure out a side of the real Lufasu that she didn't know about. The man asks Lufasu if she knew about the customs of the Skywings, and Lufasu said she did, saying that the Skywings view the whiteness of their wings as the pride of their own race. The man asks Lufasu if she could believe such a thing. The fact that the other Skywings didn't even view them as the same just because of their different wing colors. However, Lufasu was different, since even though she had black wings, everyone else knew that they couldn't match the beauty of her wings. He explains that after Lufasu conquered all the countries, she forbade any discrimination between the Skywing race and treated everyone as equals. Lufasu suddenly feels awkward, since the guy was simping so hard for her. She tells the man that he's forgetting something, that one of the 12 heavenly stars, who are subordinates of Lufasu, was the one who snatched away their hometown. The man says he didn't forget, and he clenches his fist and adds on the fact that it can't be helped, since they betrayed Lufasu and let the demons invade them. His face is full of rage, and Lufasu asked if those words were an insult to Merak, and what he actually thinks of their king. The guy then responds saying that he's the worst foolish king, and that it makes him laugh from the bottom of his heart that he still considers himself a hero. Meanwhile, Libra is in the air, surveilling the area. She suddenly notices a demon headed towards Dina's direction. She figured that Dina will be in danger if they met, and she crashes down at the demon's location, confusing him. She then scans the demon's stats and warns him that if he goes any further, then she will be forced to use violence. The demon figured that Libra saw through his identity as he then tries to punch Libra, however it gets blocked. Libra fires at the demon, but he blocks it using wind. Libra identifies that since he can control the wind, then he must be of the wood element. The demon confirms this and introduces himself as Jupiter, one of the 7 luminaries, as he also asks for Libra's name. Libra introduces herself as Libra of the scales from the 12 heavenly stars, as she then unleashes her attack on Jupiter. Meanwhile, Ares is wandering around the city when he feels a weak presence, thinking that someone had left this so he can find them. He knows exactly who the person is and tells him to come out, and calling out his name, Agokeros. Agokeros greets Ares, and Ares asks him why he's here, to which he responds by saying that he only wants the lives of the 7 heroes. He then tells Ares that he'll ask the same question again. He reveals his true form and asks Ares to come with him on his mission to kill the 7 heroes. Ares refuses his invitation and says that his only master is Lufasu. Agokeros agrees and says that he won't make Ares swear his loyalty to the demons and to just think of them as tools. Ares, however, still refuses and tells him that their master has returned. He asks Agokeros to come with him and rejoin his master. Agokeros likes the idea, however, if they don't take out the heroes, then the same thing from the past will happen again. He declares that he will kill Merak before returning to Lufasu, as he bids Ares farewell. Dina seems to be waiting for someone, and she complains at the fact that that person is late. She was about to complain about his specific race when someone in a robe slips by her. She smiles as she creates a portal to teleport after the person. She peeks into a window and sees 5 skywings gathered together. They talk about how they cannot rely on the king, and that they have no choice but to smash the stained wings skywing members with their own hands. They then exclaim that they've also got allies on the outside, referring to someone called Jupiter, who despite having no wings, thinks the same way they do. They state that Jupiter has provided them with information in the past, and he was the one who also informed them of the Mixed Wings' plans for war against them. The group are wondering where Jupiter is currently at, since he was supposed to meet them here. Dina teleports away and smiles at the fact that the country was going to be noisier from now on. We then cut back to the demon Jupiter, who is definitely not related to Jupiter, still fighting against Libra. He is struggling, since his power is wind from the wood element, while Libra's is steel from the gold element. She also weighs a ton, which is honestly quite rude to say to a lady, but his wind can't blow her away at all because of that, making Libra the worst possible matchup for him to fight. Jupiter puts on his disguise and gripes at the fact that he has to retreat. He uses his wind to escape, and Libra swears that she'll definitely bring him down the next time they meet. Lufasu's party regrouped to share the information they gathered. Dina shares that the White Wings seem to be preparing themselves for war against the Mixed Wings, and there's someone named Jupiter, which Dina theorizes is a fake name, who is riling them up to take action. Libra shares that she met one of the 7 luminaries, Jupiter, and that they engaged in battle. Lufasu asked Ares if anything had happened during his walk, and he said nothing had happened. Lufasu shared what she found, and said that there is a bronze statue in the Black Town that they're worshipping, which is most likely provoking the White Wings even more. She added that it would be bad if this country and Merak were both destroyed. Dina adds on to Lufasu, and said that if the country fell, then it would destroy the balance the 3 heroes made, and that it's going to give a chance for the demons to invade. Lufasu declares that the priority is to capture both Jupiter and Jupiter. Lufasu then comes to a realization, and she's pretty sure that Jupiter and Jupiter are the same person. Libra tells her that she has come to the same conclusion, since the direction that Jupiter walked in was towards Dina's location. Dina adds on to that, and said that she was tailing a suspicious person into a hidden house where they were supposed to meet Jupiter. So that means that Jupiter was most likely headed towards that house Dina found. Libra then adds on the final piece, which is Jupiter was disguising himself as a human when she found him. Lufasu then concludes that it's very obvious that Jupiter and Jupiter are the same person. Dina understands the agenda and says that all they have to do is capture Jupiter and push all the blame onto him. We then shift over to Jupiter, who is furious at the fact that his plan was foiled by Libra. His plan was to disguise himself as Jupiter to stir up conflict between the Skywings, and then take out Merak after the Skywings have destroyed each other. Someone suddenly approaches Jupiter, making fun of the fact that he was severely beaten up. Jupiter is angry and tells the person that it was their job to keep Lufasu in check, and that was the whole reason they even approached Lufasu in the first place. The person tells Jupiter that they were waiting for him in the meeting place for a long time, and to also not ask them to do the impossible, since there is no way for them to be able to stop the Supreme Leader on their own. They tell Jupiter that they will be able to temporarily restrain Libra for about 20 minutes. Jupiter tells them to keep their promise, and he gives them a magic stone to signal him once Libra is restrained. He once again gets their reassurance, revealing the mysterious person to be Venus from the Seven Luminaries. We cut over to Lufasu's party, where Libra informs Lufasu that she hasn't seen Dina in a while. Lufasu tells her not to worry, since Dina can use teleportation magic, and she probably went back to their base to collect money. Libra is surprised that there exists teleportation magic other than Xskate nowadays. Lufasu suddenly feels a bit weird about that comment, since teleportation magic did not exist 200 years ago, and it also did not exist in the game. Dina returns and announces that she's back from shopping, and both Lufasu and Libra corner her. They then interrogate her and asked her if the teleportation magic she used is Xskate. Dina confirms it, and Lufasu realized that she wasn't exactly trying to hide her skill. She is upset at the fact that she made a fool of herself and asked Dina who she is. She stated that she existed 200 years ago, but humans shouldn't be able to live that long. Dina then retorts by saying that she's a half-elf. Lufasu remembered that you couldn't make mixed-race characters in the game, and she is about to ask Dina about her diverse skills, and Dina responds that she has been training hard for 200 years, so that she wouldn't be treated as a background character ever again. Lufasu realized that she could have just taken a look at Dina's stats, and she found out that Dina was actually quite powerful and is strong enough to fight against the Seven Luminaries. Lufasu feels like she's still overlooking something important, but Dina interrupts her thought process and randomly brings up the fact that she can bring Libra anywhere with her teleportation magic. Libra concludes that there would be no problem with this, since she doesn't sense Jupiter's presence in the area. She tells Lufasu that it would take about 10 minutes, and Lufasu agrees to it. Dina and Libra head off into the portal. Lufasu states that there's no way Jupiter would return in such a short noich, but an explosion suddenly occurs in the city. The scene shifts to the castle in Jallarhorn, where the white-winged skywings are complaining to Merak to get rid of the mixed wings. Merak, however, just sits in silence. He thinks to himself that he had originally built this country for the mixed wings who had lost their homes due to discrimination. However, when the white wings lost their hometown due to one of the 12 heavenly stars, the people allowed them to live in this country, but they started to assert their superiority and began to persecute the mixed wings once again. However, some part of Merak also agrees with them, since he is a white-winged himself. He thinks that he's unsuitable to be the king, and he can only think of one person who is suitable. We then get a flashback of his childhood. Merak's father was the king of the Skywings, and his mother was the queen, so he was always meant to be the king since he was little. However, he saw Lufasu as someone different. She kept moving forward, towards the life that she chose herself. He thought how compared to her, he was a big joke of a king. Merak is suddenly informed that the White Town has just been attacked. Jupiter in disguise helps a female Skywing get out of some rubble. She asked what happened, and he tells her that it was an attack. He yells out to the crowd that the Black Town has attacked them, with the intention of annihilating them. He then awaits for someone else, as the Skywings all point to something in the sky. Ego Karos suddenly appears, as he infects both the white Skywings and the mixed Skywings with killing intent. Lufasu observes the situation from above. She wonders if Jupiter was behind this, and that it was too convenient for him to be attacking with Libra gone. However, she realizes that a magic that causes madness is from the moon element, and Libra had told her that Jupiter's element is wood. Ares asked Lufasu what was wrong, and she told him that everyone in the country has been infected with madness. She said that it seems like there's someone other than Jupiter who wants to destroy the country. Ares asks Lufasu what would she do if it was theoretically a member of the 12 heavenly stars who started this riot because of their loyalty to Lufasu, and Lufasu responds that she'll beat the out of them until they stop, and make them work hard to make up for it. Ares thanks Lufasu for her answer, and he tells her that he knows what he has to do now. He tells Lufasu that he'll beat the out of that member until he stops, and Lufasu realizes that one of the 12 heavenly stars is actually involved in this. She tells Ares to wait, as he realizes that the only member in the 12 heavenly stars that can induce madness is Ego Karos of the goat. Lufasu is worried, since Aries is one of the weakest members of the 12 heavenly stars, and he'll pretty much lose every fight. She doesn't want him to be hasty, as she prepares to follow his trail. Meanwhile, Jupiter is celebrating and praising Aegocaros. He thinks that Aegocaros might also kill Merak, which he originally wanted to do himself, but he decided to let it off this time. He gets ready to leave the scene before Libra returns, but someone suddenly calls out to him, revealing themselves to be Libra, shocking Jupiter. Jupiter doesn't believe it, since Libra wasn't supposed to be able to return before 20 minutes was up, and he's furious at Venus, since she only had one job to do, and she still failed. Jupiter attempts to escape with his wind magic, but Libra predicts his movement and slams him to the ground. Jupiter is frustrated since Libra is able to predict his movements, and he uses wind magic to silence everything in his surroundings so that he can get away. However, Libra still manages to catch him, since having one area be completely silent in a noisy town that's in a riot is strange. No matter where Jupiter hid, Libra would just keep on finding him. Jupiter is in complete shock and terror, and Libra announces that if he keeps on trying to escape, then she'll attack him with her move Brachium, which is said to be the most destructive power between the 12 heavenly stars. She begins to count down, and Jupiter begged her not to shoot him and surrenders. He then pees his pants and faints from fear, and Libra declares her mission accomplished. Meanwhile, Aries meets up with Aegocaros, and Aegocaros asks Aries if he's there to stop him. Aries suddenly attacks him, but Aegocaros blocks the attack, as Aries tells him to stop infecting the people with madness, since it's not something that Lufasu wants. Aegocaros, however, tells Aries that it's his way to prove his loyalty to Lufasu by killing the 7 heroes, as he unleashes his attack called Luna Shooter. Aries blocks the attack, but Aegocaros unleashes another attack called Lunatic Rain, which hits him. He is worn out, but he uses his skill measure theme and charges at Aegocaros, declaring that he will definitely stop him. However, Aegocaros fools him with an illusion, as he unleashes his ultimate attack, Deneb Al-Jidi, and fires it at Aries. However, Lufasu suddenly appears and blocks the attack, asking Aegocaros what he was thinking, trying to kill his own ally like that. Aegocaros tears up at the sight of Lufasu, and he starts bawling his eyes out. Lufasu feels awkward since she was originally planning on beating him up, but she changed her mind since Aegocaros was so genuinely worried about her. She tells him to release the citizens from their madness, and she'll forgive his actions. She then tells him to lend his power to her instead of the demons, and that she's on a journey to reclaim the 12 heavenly stars, and he's the third one, to which Aegocaros agrees to. He takes on a human form and joins the party. Aries feels weird since Aegocaros didn't agree to stop when it was him telling him to, but at least they were able to prevent the civil war from happening. However, Aegocaros retorts by saying that the citizens won't stop even after he dispelled his magic, since his magic only amplifies the negative energy that already exists inside of people, so all he did was give them a little push. Dina suddenly appears out of nowhere, declaring that there's a way to stop the civil war. Lufasu asked her where Libra was, and Dina tells her that Libra had sensed Jupiter's presence and went after him. Dina said that if they were able to bring Jupiter in as the mastermind of everything, then they can direct all of the Skywing hatred onto him. Aegocaros suddenly brings up Dina to Lufasu and asks whether she's the advisor with great stealth skills that always blended into the background, and everyone was shocked that he actually recognized her. Meanwhile, the White Wings and the Black Wings are currently at a standoff against each other. Someone suddenly yells out at them to stop, revealing himself to be Merak. Lufasu observes Merak and notes that his appearance is the same, but he's somehow missing a wing. She looks at his stats and found out that he lost his wing to the Demon King. Dina adds on that it's the same thing that happened to Migrez's leg, and that 200 years ago, after the Demon King defeated the 7 heroes, he cursed them and stole a piece of their body from each of them. Something suddenly drops down from the sky, which was revealed to be Libra carrying a tied-up Jupiter. Migrez seems to recognize the golem, but Dina interjects and tells everyone to calm down and listen to her. She introduces him as Jupiter of the 7 luminaries, and says that some of the white-winged Skywings would probably recognize his face. She tells everyone that the demons would be the ones who would benefit the most from this conflict, and she tells everyone to think of who actually is the real enemy that they should be hating right now. Dina secretly smiles, which Jupiter takes notice of, and he seems to recognize Dina. However, he gets cut off by all the Skywings who wanted to kill him. Jupiter starts yelling, realizing why Libra was able to return so quickly, confusing Lufasu. He suddenly breaks free and charges at Dina, saying that she planned to betray him from the very start. However, he is suddenly pierced by Libra. Jupiter attempts to tell Libra to listen to him. However, Libra refuses, as Jupiter mumbles out that everyone is being deceived by Dina. Libra then decapitates Jupiter, killing him. Lufasu didn't really hear what Jupiter said, as Merak approaches her and asks if she's the owner of Libra, and that if she is, then she should come over to his castle, which Lufasu agrees to, since she wants to confirm whether or not Merak is a player like her. Lufasu's party arrives at Merak's castle, and Merak asks her if she could take off her disguise and show him her face. Lufasu reveals herself to Merak, confirming his suspicions. Lufasu felt a light despair from Merak, similar to when he met Migres, confirming that he's not a player. She then tells Merak that he seems weaker than he was before, and Merak denies this, saying that he was always weak from the start, and that he's unfit to be king. He then says that it would have been better if Lufasu remained the ruler, and that the 7 heroes really shouldn't have won against her that time. Lufasu is enraged by this, and slams her fist on the table, breaking it and knocking Merak back. She asks Merak if he's making a fool out of her, and tells him that he's one of the 7 heroes who defeated her, and someone like him should not be whimpering like this. Migres tears up at this remark, as Lufasu tells him that she hopes that he would no longer make a fool out of her, and that he should prove that he has the power to fix the current mess. Her party then leaves the scene. Libra asks Lufasu if there was something wrong, and Lufasu replies that it was unlike her to shout like that. However, Libra tells her that her gallant figure is something that would forever be preserved inside of her memory, and that it's unfortunate that they weren't able to leave behind any physical records of her. Lufasu tells Libra to delete the recording and photos. However, Libra then asks Lufasu what photos are supposed to be. Ares asks if it's some kind of magic, and asks Agokaros if he knows, which he responds no. Lufasu suddenly remembers to the first day she arrived in this world, as she brought up the idea of photos to Dina. However, Dina somehow knew what photos are. Lufasu tells Dina that she has something she wants to discuss with her privately, to which Dina smiles at. Lufasu isolates Dina, telling her to drop the act, and she asks Dina what her true identity is. Dina confirms that she had been lying about being her advisor, and Lufasu adds that Dina is also not someone from her kingdom, since Libra would have Dina stored inside her memory. Dina also confirms this, and says that she's simply a girl who knew that there was an NPC in Lufasu's tower with the advisor background setting, and simply put it to good use. Lufasu comes to the realization that Dina is actually a player. Lufasu asked Dina if she had used her memory manipulation skill on Ares and Agokaros, and Dina confirms this as well, stating that she used her skill on Ares when they first met, and on Agokaros when he was at the demon castle. Lufasu then asks how Libra was not able to recognize her, and Dina answers that it was because golems don't have brains, so memory manipulation would not work on them. Lufasu realizes that's why the golems back at her tomb were unable to recognize Dina. Dina tells Lufasu that she was really surprised that Lufasu was also a player, and she tells her that she's actually a test player who was hired by the administrators to test out the new half-elf race that was going to be added to the game. Lufasu then asks Dina what she means when she said that she had met Agokaros at the demon castle. Dina's hair color suddenly starts to turn gold, and she tells Lufasu that she has the ability to travel to the demon castle whenever she likes. Dina tells Lufasu that she was planning on continuing her advisor act for a bit longer so that Lufasu and the demons can destroy each other. However, that plan seems to have failed, so she's going to change to her plan B, which is to defeat Lufasu and turn her into her pawn. Lufasu, however, is not convinced that a level 300 like Dina can defeat her. Dina calls Lufasu an idiot and says that her stats are fake, created by her status concealment skill that was going to be introduced in the update. She then reveals her actual stats, which turned out to be level 1000. Dina changes her appearance and introduces herself as Venus of the Gold and one of the 7 luminaries. Dina leaps into the air and fires a volley of rocks at Lufasu. However, Lufasu intercepts the attack by summoning a bunch of swords, but Dina simply smiles and blocks the attack with a portal. She tells Lufasu that she'll return her attack and redirects all the swords at Lufasu. Lufasu dodges the attack and charges at Dina. However, Dina simply teleports away and uses her ability Oxo, which summons powerful raindrops and causing roots to sprout from the ground. The roots start to chase down Lufasu. However, Lufasu simply destroys all of them with a single kick. She charges at Dina again, to which Dina responds to by teleporting away again. However, this time Lufasu was able to predict her movement, and she takes a swing at Dina, which Dina just barely manages to dodge. Dina strikes Lufasu in the face. However, Lufasu was unimpressed by the attack, and she tells Dina that although they're both level 1000, Dina was a rear guard mage type, so a physical attack from her won't even reduce 1% of Lufasu's HP. Lufasu then retaliates with her skill Blade Bash, sending Dina back and toppling to the ground. Lufasu tells Dina to give up, since she has no chance of winning. Lufasu explains how one of the 7 heroes, Migres, was also a rear guard mage like Dina. However, Migres took many countermeasures for any fights against vanguards, which Dina did not have any of. Lufasu concludes that Dina must be a test player who doesn't actually play the game itself. Dina asks Lufasu if she's going to forgive her, and Lufasu mentions how Dina had previously helped her on numerous occasions, and that it was her own fault to be deceived by Dina. Lufasu tells Dina that she doesn't resent her, and asks for the reason why Dina wanted Lufasu and the demons to destroy each other. Dina, however, is furious, and uses her attack Dawn Star, which summons a giant meteor in the sky. Dina hops into a portal, gloating as she asks Lufasu what she'll do, since the 12 stars would most likely be fine from the attack, but the citizens in the kingdom and Merak won't be. Lufasu accepts Dina's challenge and prepares to intercept the meteor. She uses her skill Iron Fist and strikes the meteor, shattering it to pieces. Dina drops to her knees in defeat, bewildered at what just happened. Lufasu asks Dina if she still wanted to continue, and Dina admits defeat. Lufasu asks Dina if she can tell her everything now. Dina tells Lufasu that she arrived as a test player right after Lufasu was sealed. She explained how numerous players who weren't written in the novelization began to disappear and leaving no traces, as if they had never existed. Because of that, Dina came to the conclusion that the world is actually the novelized version of the game. Lufasu recaps what the novel system is, and explains that it's a system where players' actions in the game can become a novel and be incorporated into the game's actual story. Lufasu does not like the idea of the world being based on the novel version, since there were not a lot of players who had been novelized. Dina explains how the people she met were the only friends she had in this world, but says how they all eventually perished. Dina explains how she loathed the demons for taking away everything she had, but no matter how many demons she killed, she didn't stand a chance against the Demon King. Dina decided the best she could do was infiltrate the 7 luminaries and try her best to slow down the demon's invasion. Her plan was to get Lufasu to fight the Demon King, hoping that she could potentially defeat him. Dina begins to recount to Lufasu about how she tricked Jupiter. However, Lufasu has a strange feeling inside her, as if something about Dina's story wasn't adding up. Lufasu overlooks this and asks Dina if she's her enemy. Dina answers no, however she did try to use her, which is basically the same as having hostile intentions. However, Lufasu tells Dina to continue serving her, confusing Dina. Dina stutters and asks Lufasu if it's really alright, and Lufasu says that she still hasn't repaid Dina's favor for helping her countless times. Lufasu adds that the concept of having an advisor scheming behind her back sounds pretty interesting to her, and that it's also useful to have a dangerous subordinate on her side. Dina asks Lufasu if she's really a player and not the real Lufasu who received the player's memories, and Lufasu laughs it off, saying that there were numerous times where their memories were mixing up, so she's not even sure about it anymore. Lufasu tells Dina that she had finally met someone from her original world, so she can overlook what she has done to some extent. Lufasu concludes that since Migres and Merak were both not players, then it's very likely that the last of the 7 hero who's alive, Bennett Nash, isn't a player either, which means that her and Dina would be the only irregulars in this world. She extends her hand out to Dina and tells her to come with her, and to use her strength to serve her. Dina transforms back to her original appearance and accepts Lufasu's proposition to be her advisor until the day the Demon King is defeated. Dina kneels down and officially joins Lufasu's party. The scene shifts over to the castle in the country of Jallarhorn, where the White Skywings are pleading with Merak. They tell him that even though they had been deceived by the demons, it was only because they wanted the country to be better, and that Merak didn't even listen to their pleas. Merak told them that he didn't give them permission to speak, as he unleashes his intimidation skill and began to discipline the Skywings. Merak thinks to himself that he doesn't like acting like this, however it's his duty as a king so that his subordinates won't look down on him. He smiles and tells Lufasu that he'll get over all of his problems. Meanwhile, Lufasu, who's sitting inside her van, senses Merak's intimidation and smiles. Lufasu turns over to Ego Karos and asks him if he has any useful information from working with the demon folk. Ego Karos says that he's heard news that the kingdom of Levitine has begun to move. Lufasu didn't know what that place was, and Dina explains that it's a kingdom that was founded by the Sword King Aliath, one of the 7 heroes, and it's also the kingdom where Lufasu was first summoned. Ego Karos adds that it seems like Levitine has finally succeeded in summoning a hero. The scene cuts over to the throne room in Levitine, where the elf mage that had summoned Lufasu is crying tears of joy, as he had finally summoned a hero. A high school boy sat in the center of the throne room, confused on where he is. A boy reminisces about his policeman dad and how he had always looked up to him. He told his dad that he wants to be a policeman when he gets older and asks what he's supposed to do to achieve that. His father tells him that he needs to become a person who wouldn't hesitate to help out people in trouble. The boy's name is Minamijuji Sei, an all-around very average Japanese high school student. He recounts how he one day heard a voice inside his head asking for help. Confused, he asks where that voice is coming from, and if they need him to call an ambulance. A hole suddenly opens up beneath him, sucking Sei inside, and sending him to a world called Midgard. He recounts how the people who summoned him told him his goal is to defeat the demons and the supreme ruler. Sei has doubts about whether he can kill someone. However, if he abandons these people, then he'll never become the person he always wanted to be. He accepts the commission, since he knows that his dad wouldn't abandon anyone, even if it's in another world. Despite his bold claims, however, Sei is saddened by the fact that he doesn't have the strength to back it up, as he gets absolutely demolished in a sword fight, forcing him to surrender. His opponent is someone named Friedrich, a master of the sword who is regarded as the sword saint. Sei is grateful to be trained by the strongest swordsman in the world. However, there's a problem. Friedrich's face is revealed to be a tiger beast man, as he begins to roar at Sei, as he is incapable of speaking the human language. Sei notes that the beastmen are able to communicate in human language. However, he has never heard Friedrich say a single word at all. A voice tells Sei that the Captain Friedrich was offended by the fact that Sei was daydreaming during his training, and Sei addresses the woman as the vice captain, a female knight who's translating for the sword saint. Sei thinks about the cliché, beautiful-looking female knights, however is appalled at the fact that the vice captain turned out to be a gorilla. Friedrich starts to growl, and Sei asks the vice captain what he's saying. She translates, saying that the captain wants to go eat chicken. Sei asks what he's supposed to do, and the vice captain tells him that the training is over, as the captain wants to head outside, to which Sei remarks that the captain is a bit too fickle. Now I know you weebs aren't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, so here's the definition for fickle up on screen. Someone calls out to Sei, and they're revealed to be the elf who had summoned him. We finally learn his name to be Cruz, who informs Sei that they finally have all of their party members assembled for their journey, and he tells Sei to take Friedrich and come with him to the throne room. The king greets Sei inside the throne room, and he informs Sei that the time for his journey has come. He tells Sei that he has prepared the very best equipment and people to take for his journey. He introduces them to be the Sword Saint Friedrich at level 120, the king's advisor Cruz Northern at level 88, and a mage Alfie at level 72, and is the top graduate of Suval's Magic Academy. She turned out to also be Gant's daughter, and she learned some swordsmanship from him. In case you guys forgot, Gantz was that bald mercenary from Suval in part 1 of this series. He's definitely a very important character, so you guys should really be jotting this down. Next, The king presents a bunch of steel golems gifted to them from Migres, and 10 elite rangers over level 50 from the spy division to help the hero from the shadows. And finally, he presents the Supreme Ruler's treasures that was recovered from the black-winged royal tomb by the 4 members of the Hawkeyes. Sei is relieved at that, since he's only level 15. The king orders Sei and his party to go defeat the Demon King and the newly revived Supreme Ruler to save the entire world. The party heads out into the city, where everyone is hosting a celebration for their departure. The party reaches the city gates, and they step outside. Sei suddenly notices black feathers from the sky, and the entire party begins to panic. Cruz screams in terror, as Lufasu Mafahl stood right outside of the city. So imagine fighting the final boss at the very first stage. However, Cruz then notices someone else in the sky, and he trembles in fear. The Demon King himself also shows up in front of the city. Sei panics as both Lufasu and the Demon King has somehow appeared at the exact same time, and he thinks that he's absolutely fucked. Lufasu glances over at the party, and she assumes that Sei is most likely the hero, and the man standing right in front of her must be the official last boss of the game, the Demon King. She then provides some much-needed context, as we flash back to a few hours ago when Lufasu first learned of the hero summoning. Lufasu thought back to when it was just a game, and how Alioth was the only person to ever get the hero class. After gaining the hero class, Alioth became incredibly overpowered and gained a bunch of deadly skills. His favorite skill was Climax, which allowed him to revive while increasing his attack and critical rate by 100%. Lufasu figures that since the demons know about the summoning, they'll definitely try to eliminate the hero before he gets a chance to grow stronger. Dina states that it's obvious that the demons would try to kill the hero before he grows stronger. However, the kingdom has a barrier created by the Sword King Alioth, and someone at the level of the 7 luminaries would definitely not be able to break it. The barrier was created by using the hero skill, Succession, which creates a massive barrier that boosts the player's abilities inside while weakening enemies. But in exchange, the hero who uses the skill will be killed, which basically equals a permanent death in this world compared to the game where you can just respawn. Dina explains how the Sword King Alioth lost both of his eyes to the Demon Lord, and he used his skill to create the barrier around the entire kingdom before he passed away. Lufasu figures that if the barrier is there, then the kingdom will most likely be safe, to which Ares agrees to as even he and Ego Karos struggle with the barrier. Dina states that as long as the Demon Lord and his son don't appear, then the kingdom will be safe. However, once the hero steps outside of the barrier, the 7 luminaries will most likely be camping at his location and take him out. Lufasu thinks that it would be a good opportunity to take out one of the 7 luminaries, and she decides to head over to the kingdom on her own and help out the hero. Lufasu observes the barrier and realizes why the 7 luminaries aren't able to get close. She then looks to the side and asks someone if they agree, as the Demon Lord suddenly pops out through a portal. We flash forward back to in front of the city, where the Demon Lord addresses Lufasu as Alcor, as introduces himself as Olm. Lufasu is confused by how she was addressed, and Olm tells her that it's her nickname, meaning a being that brings death when encountered, and it's how the demons address her. Lufasu proceeds to introduce herself, while affecting the hero's party with her intimidation status. She is surprised that the Demon Lord had personally come since she assumed he'd be afraid of the hero. However, Olm tells her that he only fears 2 people in this world, the goddess and Lufasu herself, which is why he'd always avoid a direct confrontation with her. Lufasu is surprised, since Olm had appeared before her just now, and Olm tells her that he realized something after Lufasu was sealed. Olm tells her that she's the only one who can escape the goddess scenario, confusing Lufasu. The Demon Lord tells her that if she wants to know, then she'll have to force him in a battle. Lufasu accepts his challenge, and the 2 of them charge at each other. A giant explosion is created, and Alfie starts to break down in fear, thinking that it's impossible for them to ever beat those 2 monsters. Sei, however, observes the battle, as Lufasu and Olm unleashes a volley of attacks and skills that I'm just not going to list out. Olm notes that it's been a while since he's fought such a worthy opponent ever since his battle against the 7 heroes 200 years ago. Lufasu begins to silently panic because she had not anticipated how strong the Demon Lord would be, and she figures that if they kept fighting, then she would eventually lose. Olm suddenly calls out Lufasu for underestimating him, because he knows that her true power is not at that level. Lufasu is confused since her power should be around that of the 7 heroes. However, Olm explains how she should be much stronger than this. Lufasu tells Olm that she has no idea what he's talking about, shocking Olm. He suddenly comes to a realization and curses the goddess for making the first move. Lufasu asks him to clarify, and Olm tells her that it's too early for the two of them to fight, and that they can't surpass the goddess scenario like this. Lufasu still has no clue what that is, and Olm explains that everything that occurs in this world is meant to follow the goddess scenario. The demons, for example, were created by the goddess only to make the scenario more interesting. Lufasu is confused as to why the demon lord is giving her all this information, and he suddenly asks her if she knows why demons attack and kill humans. Lufasu answers that they want to expand their territories, and Olm tells her that it's only the textbook answer, and that the real reason is because they literally cannot live without killing humans. If they don't kill any humans, then they will all disappear. Once demons disappear, their fragments are turned into mana and becoming the source of magic. Everything about the demons were all created by the goddess, and Olm was the one entrusted to manage them. Lufasu asks Olm if that means that he's different than the rest of the demons, but Cruz suddenly interjects. He asks if their goddess Alovenus, who loves all beings, is really the one who wants to plunge the world into despair. Olm confirms this, saying that the goddess never wanted to save the world, and that's why the war from 200 years ago even happened. He said although Lufasu was frightening back then, there wasn't a reason for her to be sealed before the demons were defeated, and that it'd be better to seal her after she defeated the demon lord. However, instead, the 7 heroes did not wait for the right time before sealing Lufasu, and the demon lord asks everyone if they think that's strange. Lufasu thinks about it, and realizes that because of that, the 7 heroes lost to the demon lord, and the demons ended up taking over. The ones who defeated Lufasu also deeply regretted their actions afterwards. Olm tells Lufasu that she was most likely the one who realized the truth first, and that's why she should be the one to stop the goddess scenario. Lufasu notices a portal opening up behind the demon lord, and he's about to say something, when he suddenly gets interrupted by an Xgate attack. Dina suddenly appears and attacks Olm with her move Dawnstar. Libra suddenly appears and snatches Lufasu away. Libra tells her that fighting the Demon King now would not be a good idea, but Lufasu tells her to wait, saying that the heroes are still down there. Olm glances over at Dina and tells her that he had already put up a barrier so that no one can eavesdrop on them, to which Dina smirks at. Olm addresses Dina as Venus and asks what she's doing. Dina tells Olm that she was just putting on an act to gain the trust of Lufasu's party, though Olm is not convinced as Dina had went all out on that attack earlier. Dina tells Olm that she knew he could take it, to which Olm scoffs at. He then asks Dina if she knew about the fact that Lufasu Mafahl has been weakened. Dina admits to knowing, and Olm asks Dina if she was the one behind it. Dina denies the accusation and says that someone as weak as her would not be capable of such a feat, and that the only one who is the goddess herself. Meanwhile, Lufasu is bummed out that she was forced to retreat since the heroes were still there, but Libra tells her that the Demon King's objective was her, so the heroes should be fine. Lufasu asks Libra if she heard her conversation with Olm, and Libra confirms this, since Dina had opened a small gate near Lufasu. Lufasu thinks back to how she was in the middle of something important before being interrupted, when Dina suddenly announces her return. She tells Lufasu that the Demon King had immediately left the scene once Lufasu left, and he didn't touch the heroes at all. Lufasu thought back to what the Demon Lord said, and she hypothesized that the real Lufasu had discovered something 200 years ago about the goddess scenario. She gets upset at the fact that she didn't get to hear what the Demon Lord had to say, when she suddenly gets interrupted, as their group had just arrived at Vanaheimer. Lufasu recounts how Vanaheimer was formerly a Skywing country, and also Lufasu's hometown, and now it currently holds Parthenos of the Maiden from the 12 heavenly stars. Parthenos had driven all the Skywings away and put up a barrier around the entire country, and the group is now here to pick her up. However, Lufasu thought back to what Dina said about Parthenos being healthy, and she's having doubts that Parthenos would be fine after 200 years, since she's just a normal human. Lufasu explained how Parthenos in the game was able to form parties with other human NPCs and constantly spam heal spells and buffs. Lufasu figures that if Parthenos is still alive, then she must be incredibly old and would most likely not even be able to follow Lufasu on her journey. The group manages to pass through the barrier, meaning that Parthenos viewed them all as allies. The group eventually stumbles upon a small cottage, and Lufasu knocks on the door. A girl slightly opens the door, and Lufasu realizes that it's not Parthenos. The girl notices Lufasu's black wings, and she opens the door, asking if she was the Lufasu her grandma always talked about. The girl is revealed to be a skywing, and she introduces herself as Virgo. Virgo offers to take the group to her grandmother, and Lufasu proceeds to use Examination Eye on Virgo. She notices that Virgo is a full skywing with a pretty high level, and she assumes that Virgo is probably Parthenos' adopted granddaughter. Virgo tells everyone that they've arrived, and she introduces her grandmother, who is now in a gravestone. Virgo revealed that Parthenos had choked on a fruit last year and ended up dying as a result. Lufasu asks Dina about this, and Dina assumed that Parthenos was still alive since the barrier was still intact. Virgo explains that it's because Parthenos' spirit is still roaming the world because of unfinished business. Lufasu asks Virgo if she knows where Parthenos' spirit is, but Virgo says she doesn't. Ares is confused, since Virgo would have no way of knowing that Parthenos became a ghost if she's never seen her. But Virgo explains that it's because Parthenos would occasionally show up to repair the barrier. Virgo tells the group that her grandma had just finished repairing the barrier not long ago, so it'll be some time before she shows up again. Ego Karos decides to just break the barrier to get Parthenos out, and he destroys it using his skill Invisible Break. Lufasu scolds him for this, and he sulks. Even after the barrier was destroyed, however, Parthenos still didn't show up, and Virgo tells the group that she's probably in the town above. Ares asks if it was Lufasu's hometown, and that they can find her mom's grave up there. Libra explains how every year, Lufasu would come visit her mother's grave, and she suggests they go visit it. Lufasu agrees to it, but is very confused as it was something from the real Lufasu's past that she has no clue about. Lufasu ended up creating a Tanaka jet to take the entire group up the Vanahemer. Lufasu observes the town, and a ton of childhood memories started to appear inside her head. Ares asks her if she's all right, and Lufasu brushes it aside and tells everyone to look for Parthenos at Lufasu's house. Libra observes that the town seems pretty nice, and Lufasu recounts how it only had bitter memories for her of the neighborhood kids throwing rocks at her. Libra immediately retracts her statement, and Ares and Ego Karos decides to burn the whole place down. They all transform and started to destroy everything. Lufasu orders them all to stop and said that she doesn't want her house and her mother's grave to get destroyed. The group arrives at Lufasu's house, which was a giant mansion. However, Lufasu tells everyone that she only entered the house a few times, and that her true house was the little shed next door. Lufasu explains how her father loathed her since she had black wings and considered killing her, but her mother managed to persuade him to isolate her in a worn-out shed. Libra asks Lufasu for permission to kill her father, but Lufasu tells her that he has died long ago. Lufasu enters the shed, and she suddenly gets a flashback of her mother. Lufasu thinks that her best objective should be to find something that the real Lufasu found out about the goddess scenario 200 years ago. Dina asks Lufasu what that is, and Lufasu answered that the demon lord said that everything in the world would move according to it. She asks the group if any of them have heard of it, but they all answered no. A voice suddenly offers to answer the question, as a young girl suddenly appears and greets Lufasu. Lufasu doesn't recognize the girl, as the girl starts to joke about the Skywing's long lifespan compared to her who's now become a ghost. She asked Lufasu if she was unable to recognize her, even though she worked so hard to recreate her appearance from her prime. Virgo realizes she recognizes the girl, as she turned out to be none other than Parthenos. We get a flashback of Parthenos, who was once the chief of a tribe devoted to the goddess as well as the goddess proxy, since she's the direct descendant of the first human race that the goddess Alavinus created. When Lufasu invades the goddess' sacred castle, Parthenos offers up her life for the goddess. However, Lufasu decides to kidnap her instead, and she tells Parthenos that she needs to see the world's current condition, since she has never once stepped foot outside of the sacred castle. Lufasu takes Parthenos to a charred battleground, the horrors of which shock Parthenos. We end the flashback as Lufasu tells Parthenos to tell her everything she knows about the goddess scenario. Parthenos agrees. However, she first asks Lufasu how much of her past memories she can actually remember. Lufasu is surprised that Parthenos knew about her situation, and Parthenos reveals to her that Lufasu herself was actually originally the one to predict the goddess tampering with her memories. Libra does not seem surprised, as she was able to sense Lufasu occasionally acting like she doesn't remember what she did in the past. Lufasu asks Parthenos why the past Lufasu ordered her to seal away this town 200 years ago. Parthenos tells her that it'll be faster to just show her, and she takes Lufasu over to Vanaheim's peak. Parthenos points down at the giant crater and tells Lufasu that the answer she's looking for is down there. Lufasu looks down and is met with the slumbering giant sky dragon, who is meant to be one of the goddess vanguards, as well as one of the 5 dragons. Lufasu is shocked by the appearance of one of the 5 dragons, as they never actually appeared in the game and were only mentioned through text. She explains how the 5 dragons each control the 5 elements of fire, earth, wood, moon, and sun, while the goddess Elevenus controls the elements of gold and water. She panics upon looking at the dragon's stats, as it far exceeds her own, and she doubts that she can even win with all 7 heroes in their prime on her side. Parthenos explains how the dragons are all meant to be in deep sleep. However, they are said to awake from their slumber once the world reaches true danger. Lufasu assumes that's why she had ordered Parthenos to seal away this place in the past. However, Parthenos tells her that she doesn't possess the abilities to seal a dragon, and that the real reason she sealed away Vanaheim was to create an illusion that peace still exists so the dragon won't wake up, and she drove away all the citizens of Vanaheim so that they won't get involved in any of this. Lufasu asks Parthenos if Merak and the other Skywings know about this, and Parthenos said that only a handful of the Skywings knew about the dragon, but Merak is definitely among those people. She then adds that the Skywings all revered the dragon as a sacred guardian deity. Lufasu, however, can't agree with that sentiment, as the goddess can just send out all 5 of the dragons out of sheer boredom and instantly destroy the world, making them more like gods of destruction. Parthenos tells Lufasu that even she would not be able to defeat all 5 dragons and the goddess at once, which was why she had made the first move to seal away the 5 dragons, and eventually challenged the goddess after defeating the Demon King. Lufasu asks Parthenos how much danger does the world have to be in for the dragons to wake up, considering the fact that humanity is currently being cornered by the demons. Parthenos, however, doesn't know the answer, but she assumes that the goddess just doesn't see the demons as threats. Lufasu asks Parthenos if all 5 dragons are sealed if she had made the first move, and Parthenos tells Lufasu that 3 other dragons have been sealed by other members of the 12 heavenly stars. Lufasu realizes that there's still 1 dragon short, and Parthenos tells her that they still can't find the location of the moon dragon, and Lufasu theorizes that it might be in the actual moon due to its name. Parthenos then warns Lufasu about one of the goddess' unique abilities called Avatar, which allows her to create a clone of herself that allows her to freely move around. Lufasu thinks back to everything she had learned, and she figured that the real Lufasu was a massive thorn in the goddess' way, which is why the goddess had to seal away her memories when she revived. And the method she used was none other than the current host of Lufasu, and he finally figures out what the role the goddess gave him on the day he transmigrated was. Lufasu decides to search for the real Lufasu's true objective and to help achieve it, as a means of getting revenge on the goddess for involving her in this whole situation. Lufasu's group prepares to depart, as Parthenos apologizes for being unable to accompany her due to being a ghost. However, she offers to let Virgo go with Lufasu, as she had taught her everything she knew. Virgo is taken aback by this, and Lufasu asks Virgo if she's okay with it. Virgo figures that Parthenos would probably force her to go anyways, so she decides to join Lufasu's party and becomes Virgo, the maiden of the 12 heavenly stars. The group sets off, as Parthenos waves them all goodbye. Lufasu tells everyone that their next objective is to find the other heavenly stars inside of human territory, and Agokaros tells Lufasu that Scorpius of the Scorpion had joined the demons to willingly become their puppet as long as she can obliterate all of humanity. He tells Lufasu that she had already wrecked Hradi, a country founded by the adventurer King Fekta from the Seven Heroes. Lufasu deduces that Scorpius is probably the most dangerous member currently, and Ego Karos tells Lufasu that she had managed to break through her level limit and became level 900. Lufasu is confused since all of the tamed monsters are meant to cap at level 800, and she asks Ego Karos which country Scorpius will be in next. Ego Karos tells her that Scorpius is headed to the country of Blutgang, which Dina explains is the dwarf country founded by Smithy King Mizar of the Seven Heroes. Lufasu declares that their next destination is going to be the country of Blutgang to stop Scorpius. Meanwhile, in the suburbs of Blutgang, Scorpius is choking a man over a pile of dead bodies, telling him that his kind are the ones who robbed Lufasu from her. She kills the man and declares to Lufasu that she'll paint the whole world in despair for her. Lufasu's group finally arrives at the mobile capital of Blutgang, which turned out to be a massive battleship. The group steps out into the city, and Dina explains how Blutgang is actually a massive level 770 golem created by Mizar, which was why it had always been able to repel the demon's attacks. Libra lays out the entire map of Blutgang, and Lufasu is surprised by how knowledgeable she is about it. Libra explains how Blutgang is technically her little brother, and Lufasu is reminded by the fact that Libra was actually created by Mizar. Dina interjects and explains how Blutgang is very sturdy against physical attacks. Dina states that both Ares and Libra would struggle with it, and that it can apparently even transform into a humanoid form. It's kind of reminding me of a whole other franchise here, not gonna lie. Dina then brings up how Scorpius, on the other hand, would be the worst matchup to go against Blutgang. Lufasu explains that Scorpius specializes in poison attacks, and golems are immune to poison. However, the citizens inside of Blutgang are not, and Scorpius poison spreads rather easily. Dina then surprises Lufasu with more information. As it turns out, Carcinus of the Crab from the 12 Heavenly Stars is also currently residing inside of Blutgang. Lufasu asks Dina if she knows where exactly he is, but she says she doesn't. Libra, however, tells Lufasu that she's able to memorize the breathing of everybody inside of Blutgang and determine which one is Carcinus. Lufasu decides to have a meal while waiting, and the group enters a crab-themed restaurant. The group heads inside the restaurant, and the barkeep immediately looks over at them. He suddenly starts flipping out, and he grabs Lufasu's hand, telling her that he's waited for this day for so long. He started dancing around with Lufasu, calling her his mistress, and welcoming her back after 200 years. Libra suddenly attacks the man, but he manages to block it with his finger. The man is revealed to be none other than Carcinus the Crab, and the member of the 12 Heavenly Stars with the highest defense. Lufasu asked Carcinus why he opened up a restaurant, and he told her that since the day she lost, he had been traveling across countries to gather information. However, he found that it was more efficient to build a place to gather information instead. Dina, however, tells him that he should have opened a store in the trade city Idolier, since Blutgang is a pretty isolated city. Carcinus then begins to sulk, and Ares and Ego Karos tells him that he's just as stupid as he was in the past. Lufasu tells Carcinus that she's gathering all 12 heavenly stars back, and that he's the 5th one. She asks him to join her, and Carcinus of the Crab from the 12 heavenly stars joins the party. An alarm suddenly starts to blare across the city, as someone announces that the mobile capital Blutgang will be entering battle station against Scorpius of the Scorpion from the 12 heavenly stars. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, Scorpius is stood with an army of scorpions, as she starts to get way too horny with murdering all of the dwarves inside of Blutgang, saying that just imagining it makes her wet.
Oh, hell no, man.
Admiral Janelle, the leader of the dwarves' royal capital, commands all forces to lock cannons onto Scorpius, and he orders them all to fire. Scorpius, however, easily manages to cut through the missiles with her tail. Admiral Janelle then deploys all of their golems, and Scorpius orders her army of scorpions to intercept the attack. The Admiral then fires the main cannon, which shot out a massive beam of energy. The beam takes out every troop on the battlefield except for Scorpius, who isn't pleased at the Admiral for sacrificing his own troops. The Admiral then calls for the Scale Squad, as they're the only beings to be able to stand up to Scorpius. Someone suddenly informs him that the demons have invaded Bloodgang, much to his shock. Meanwhile, in Bloodgang, Lufasu's group observes all the demons who've invaded the city. Ego Karos recognizes the moon elemental mana and name-drops Luna as the mastermind. Ego Karos tells Lufasu that Luna is one of the 7 luminaries and governs over the moon, specializing in hidden assassinations and stirring up disturbances. Lufasu orders Ego Karos to go after Luna and capture her alive, but to not cause any unnecessary destructions or involve any innocent civilians into the matter. She then instructs Ares and Libra to take care of the rest of the demons, while Dina, Virgo, and Carcinus will accompany her to stop Scorpius. The 7 luminaries member, Luna, wanders around the city, and she recounts how both Mars and Jupiter have failed, and that there can be no more failures, as it'll also be the failure of Terra, the founder of the 7 luminaries and son of the Demon King. We flash back to the past, where Terra had always looked down on Luna for being a woman, and only a temporary member of the 7 luminaries due to them having no other options. Venus suggests to Luna that she should try showing off to Terra and grab his attention, such as taking down the mobile fortress Bloodgang. In the present, Luna is determined to prove to Terra that she is capable of things other than spying, so that he'll never look down on her again. A shadow suddenly calls out to Luna and appears beside her, and Luna seems to recognize their voice. Ego Karos appears and tells Luna that she has 2 options. The first is to surrender, and the second is to succumb mercilessly, to which he'll then proceed to cut off all 4 of her limbs and sacrifice her to Lufasu. Luna gets a flashback to her childhood with Terra, and she chooses neither of the options and engages Ego Karos in combat. Meanwhile, out in the battlefield, a bunch of Libra golems suddenly appear before Scorpius. They're revealed to be the Scale Squad deployed by Admiral Janelle, as he orders them to take down Scorpius. Scorpius figures that those Libras were mass-produced versions of Mizar's creation. However, she notes that the original one should have used her ultimate move Brachium already. She concludes that these versions are incapable of using Libra's greatest weapon, and she proceeds to easily repel all of the golems due to them not having Brachium. She tears through the Libras and discovered that they only have half of the amount of scales compared to the original. She smiles and prepares to end the battle, when one of the golems suddenly gets in front of her face and activates self-destruct mode, creating a massive explosion. Admiral Janelle recounts how they've had to sacrifice a lot, but he's relieved that they've finally managed to defeat one of the 12 heavenly stars. Scorpius, however, suddenly emerges from the rubble, still intact. Admiral Janelle is shocked and realized that she had somehow managed to instantly break the mass-produced Libra to escape the explosion. Scorpius says that the same trick won't work on her twice, and declares the battle to be over. Someone suddenly uses Escape and summons a large portal, revealing that all of the golems from earlier had actually survived the attack from the main cannon. Lufasu appears on the battlefield and takes out her snake sword and kills every single scorpion on the battlefield. Lufasu's group stands on the battlefield, ready to end the fight. Lufasu planned to use the experience from the scorpions to level up Virgo. However, she's confused when the mana/experience points from the monsters started heading towards her instead. Experience would be useless on a max level like Lufasu, and she tries shooing it away. They suddenly converge together and begin to glow, confusing Lufasu. We then flash back to the heroes' party, who are currently near the country of Svel. Say had started to get more comfortable with fighting, as he engages a level 20 fuel in combat. Friedrich swoops in and saves him, and someone calls out to Say, asking if he's alright. He turns around and greets both Gantz and Jean, 2 unimportant side characters who had appeared in previous videos. Say recounts how after the fight Lufasu had with the Demon King, Alfie had decided to quit the party out of fear. The king, however, had arranged for better reinforcements, those being her father Gantz and the adventurers group Hawkeyes. Say explains that his party came to Svel to meet King Migres to get advice on battling Lufasu and the Demon King, along with how to increase Say's power as the hero. Say notes how everyone seems to dislike Lufasu, and that the conversation between her and the Demon King was completely brushed aside by everyone else's lies. Say, however, disagrees with everyone. He recounts how the Demon King mentioned the war being planned by the goddess, and infers that the goddess scenario is still going on. His plan is to learn more about Lufasu from Migres, as he thinks back to how his dad had become an alcoholic after making a terrible mistake, and he swears that he will not mistakenly attack an innocent person. Finally, an isekai hero that's not a complete idiot. Migres greets the hero party when they arrive, and Cruz explains how they are looking for a way to get Sei to level 1000. Since Migres had reached it before at the past, they figured that he probably has a secret method he can give to the hero. Migres is curious as to why they think that there's a secret method, and Cruz says that there isn't enough mana in the world to reach level 1000 through the normal way. Sei explains how leveling up would require someone to increase the amount of mana inside of them, but the needed amount will rise exponentially. One of the 7 heroes, the vampire Queen Bennett Nash, spent over 100 years killing all of the demons on a continent, but had only managed to reach level 600 before meeting Lufasu. So the fact that even humans with their short lifespans have obtained level 1000 is extremely odd. Migres answers that there is in fact a way to reach level 1000. However, he has a question for the group. He asks them what they think about the goddess who created them, and Cruz tells him that she is the absolute symbol of justice and the divine providence. Migres tells them that he will not be able to share the secret with them, since they don't understand anything, just like him back then. However, he singles out Sei and tells him he wants to talk to him privately. Cruz and the others leave the room, and Migres asks him the same question. Sei says that he doesn't really understand this world too much. However, he finds the goddess incredibly suspicious. Sei then asks Migres if he acted on his own while during the fight with Lufasu 200 years ago. Migres tells Sei that he did indeed betray Lufasu 200 years ago. However, he is unable to tell whether or not it was his own decision. Sei comes to the conclusion that the goddess must be able to manipulate the minds of every living being in Midgard. Sei then proceeds to ask Migres if Lufasu is an enemy. Migres admits that Lufasu is in fact not his enemy, but rather his friend. Sei asks Migres for help, as he does not want to mistakenly go after the wrong person since Lufasu is not their enemy. Migres tells Sei that the secret method of leveling up is in the form of an item. That item is the golden apple, which was created by Lufasu herself. We cut back over to Lufasu's perspective, where the ball of energy she was carrying earlier had transformed into a golden apple. She asks Dina what that item is, and Dina tells Lufasu that it's a golden apple that grants experience points. She tells Lufasu that this world is different from the game, and that party members won't get any experience for just being in the party. The experience points all go to the person who killed the monster, and that only 10% of the mana is actually absorbed. Lufasu realized that the average level of this world had actually always been this low, and Dina tells her that it's always been this way until a certain moment 200 years ago. That moment is during Lufasu's rule, with her ability to create the golden apple, which she used to increase the level of humanity. Dina tells Lufasu that the apple allows people to raise their level to an unattainable level, and it's definitely an annoyance to the goddess. Lufasu asks Dina if the apple is poisonous, and she tells her that it is for the sky wings, since its compressed mana has a chance to taint the wings of the person's child. So it'll be considered extremely poisonous to the sky wings since they value the purity of their wings so much. Lufasu figures that she probably can't give the apple to Virgo then, since she doesn't want to ruin her future in the white-winged community. Lufasu finally turns her attention to Scorpius, who I guess had just been standing there the whole time. Lufasu asks Scorpius if she remembers her, and Scorpius tells Lufasu that she's been thinking of her every single passing second, as she then proceeds to attack Lufasu. Lufasu dodges the attack, as Scorpius suddenly goes on this super long horny rant, which I am not going to list out. Scorpius tells Lufasu to dive into her arms, and attacks Lufasu. Karkinos uses his skill Akbens and blocks the attack. He then retaliates, as his skill Akbens strikes back with a 50% increase of the amount of damage received. Lufasu explains how Karkinos specializes in defending and counterattacking. However, he is not a good matchup against Scorpius, as her poison damage bypasses his armor and can't be counterattacked. Scorpius surrounds herself with poison to counter Karkinos. However, Lufasu gets behind her and accidentally sends Scorpius flying. Lufasu is surprised at the amount of strength she had, and realized that she is becoming closer with the original Lufasu. Scorpius gets up from the attack, and is confused as to why Lufasu can't understand her feelings. Divine power suddenly bursts out of Scorpius, and Karkinos tells Lufasu that it's just like that one time 200 years ago with the 7 heroes. Lufasu suddenly receives a bunch of old memories of the 7 heroes receiving divine power, and then suddenly going berserk. Lufasu thought back to what the Demon King said, and realized that Scorpius is currently under the goddess' control. The goddess is also buffing Scorpius, and Lufasu finally realized how the real Lufasu lost to the 7 heroes 200 years ago. She thought back to how Scorpius had managed to reach level 900, and realized that Scorpius had been under the goddess' control for a while. Lufasu gets pissed, as Scorpius is supposed to be hers. She swears to the goddess Elevenus that she'll take back Scorpius. Lufasu charges at Scorpius, and she makes a scary face, wanting to enjoy more of this battle. Lufasu comes back to her senses, and tells herself to calm down. Lufasu realized what the Demon King was talking about back then. Lufasu's power was sealed, and the current host of Lufasu is the one preventing her full power from releasing. Scorpius suddenly unleashes her true form, the Emperor Berserk Scorpion. Lufasu notes how the goddess buff is still getting stronger, and deduces that Scorpius will get stronger with every passing moment. Lufasu figures that she'll simply have to defeat Scorpius before she can surpass her, and she punches Scorpius, sending her above the clouds. Lufasu then unleashes her meteor kick, dealing critical damage to Scorpius and knocking her out. Lufasu suddenly snatches Dina and tells her that simply knocking Scorpius out isn't going to fix things, as the goddess is involved. Lufasu tells Dina that the only way to remove the goddess manipulation is through Dina herself, confusing Dina. We cut over to Libra and Ares in the city of Bloodgang, where Libra informs Ares of her suspicions towards Dina. Libra tells Ares that her mind can't be manipulated since she's a golem, and that Dina had most likely manipulated everyone else's memories. We return to Dina and Lufasu, where Lufasu reminds Dina of her thought manipulation skills, similar to that of the goddess, which means that she could attempt to dispel the effect the goddess placed on Scorpius. Dina thinks she can, and she gets to work on Scorpius. Lufasu suddenly has a realization of Dina having the same skill as the goddess. Dina claimed to be a player, however Lufasu is starting to have doubts. Lufasu then thinks back to what Parthenos had said about the goddess' special ability called Avatar, which allows her to create copies of herself that she can control. We switch over to Ego Keros, who had managed to defeat Luna of the 7 luminaries. He calls Luna a false demon, and that she could never defeat a real demon like him. Luna is confused by what he meant, and Ego Keros asked Luna if she had ever wondered why her kind never leaves a body behind when they die. Luna answers that it's because their bodies break down into mana, but Ego Keros then asks her why that is, as real demons like him all leave their bodies behind. Ego Keros is about to reveal the truth, when he's suddenly interrupted by a beam of light. The culprit being the demon prince Terra, who had just saved Luna from Ego Keros' grasp. Terra tells Luna that he had told her to be careful, and that he's glad that he made it on time. Terra tells Ego Keros that he's angry at his betrayal, but he doesn't have the time for him right now. He blasts a hole in the city wall and escapes with Luna. Lufasu notices him, and Terra gets terrified at the amount of power she has despite losing half her strength. Terra tells Luna that all of the demons are currently being controlled by someone, and that his father is even collaborating with that person. Terra says that Luna is one of the few demons that he trusts, and he tells Luna to not die, as he needs her right now. Meanwhile, Dina informs Lufasu that the goddess manipulation from Scorpius has been dispelled, and that Scorpius will soon wake up. Lufasu asks Dina who that handsome guy from earlier was, and Dina tells her that he's Terra, the son of the Demon King. Lufasu is confused, since demons are supposed to have blue skin. However, Terra's skin is white, making him look more like a human. Dina tells Lufasu that Terra would definitely be a character you can go after in a dating simulator, but Lufasu is confused since she's never played one. Dina tells Lufasu that she never seems to act like a girl, and Lufasu tells her that she's actually a guy on the inside. Dina is absolutely shocked, and Lufasu tells her that her sexual urges had all disappeared when she entered this body. so she won't be feeling anything when looking at women. The mass-produced Libras suddenly show up, and they bowed down to Lufasu. They asked Lufasu to come to the royal chamber of Blutgang, as their master is waiting for her. They tell her that their master is none other than the Smith King Mafahl of the Seven Heroes, and Lufasu is shocked that he is still alive. Terra calls for Venus, who pops out from a portal. Terra asks her where his father is, and she tells him that he had just left with his elite guard. Terra gets suspicious and asks Venus if she had influenced his father. He explains how Venus was brought to them by Sol, the leader of the seven luminaries. The color of her skin and eyes were not demon-like. However, she was still accepted due to Terra himself having the same attributes. Terra is highly suspicious of her and asks her a question. He first asks about Mars and how he manipulated into seeking out Ares. Second, he asks about Jupiter's actions in Gerelhorn and how he was asked to bring Ego Keros with him. Terra asks Venus if she was the one who had manipulated the two of them, and she confirms it. Finally, he asks whether she was the one who manipulated Scorpius to coincide with Luna's invasion, to which she also confirms. Terra gets angry, saying that it was supposed to be a covert operation, and that the plan was to sneak into Blutgang and kill the leaders. He then determines that it's strange how the hero summoning would even end up summoning Lufasu, and that Venus must be responsible for that since only she and the Demon King are able to do something like that. He then asks Venus if she had also manipulated Lufasu into fighting his father, and Venus responded that the Demon King was the one who had wanted it. Terra points his sword at Venus' neck and asks what her true plan is. Venus tells him that she can't tell him with Luna there, and Luna doesn't understand why. Venus tells her that it's because she's just a doll, just like Venus herself before she had met a certain someone. However, Terra shuts her up before she could drop any more plot details, not allowing her to insult Luna any further. Terra then removes Venus from the seven luminaries, and Venus bids the pair farewell as she sends an attack after Luna while disappearing. Luckily, Terra was able to shield Luna from the attack. Dina then randomly recaps the entire situation to Lufasu, saying that she was fired from the seven luminaries. Lufasu's group is currently following the mass-produced Libras, as they're taking them to see their master inside the royal district. Admiral Janelle greets them at the entrance and introduces himself as the one in charge of all the troops in Blutgang. Lufasu asks Janelle if he wanted to lure her in to capture her, but Janelle quickly denies it, saying that they'll be absolutely destroyed if they tried to fight her. Lufasu brings up the master that the Libra units brought up, and Janelle guides them to an area beyond the royal district. Lufasu arrives in front of a big crystal golem, and Janelle tells her that the golem is the brain of Blutgang. It contains the memories and personality of their king. As a figure inside, the crystal greets Libra and Lufasu, with them identifying him as Mafahl of the Seven Heroes. It turns out that Mafahl had left a part of himself in Blutgang and turned himself into a golem. Mafahl explains how his original self was acting strange, and that something seemed to be controlling him. Lufasu asked when the original Mafahl started to change, and Mafahl explained that it was around the time that he returned with Lufasu from the goddess realm, with some of the other heroes, Arioto, Migres, and Dubhi being the same. Mafahl explained that he had always harbored a sense of danger in Lufasu due to fear of being surpassed in golem creation, but he'd never try to kill her because of it. As a result, Mafahl would copy himself into the golem while he was still sane, and he ended up betraying Lufasu. Mafahl would return his sanity after defeating Lufasu, and he'd attempt to fight the Demon King to repent for his actions. Mafahl would end up losing his arm as a result, and he ended up deeply regretting everything as he passed away. Mafahl then tells Lufasu that the demons and the goddess are connected, and Ego Keros suddenly interjects and reveals that the demons are all magic. Ego Keros explains that the demons are not alive, and are simply just magic created to emulate living beings. He then elaborates that there are exceptions to this among the demons, the exception being Terra, who was personally created by the Demon King. Mafahl says that that information is all he knows about the goddess, but he asks Lufasu if she could fix all the destroyed golems and Libra units. Lufasu agrees, but explains that she's unable to fix the ones that were completely destroyed. Mafahl then decides to just let Lufasu use their parts for something else, since he doesn't want them to go to waste. Lufasu decides that she could perhaps use the parts to make a new weapon for Libra. She grins and asks Mazal to work together, and Mazal happily agrees. The group goes outside of Blutgang and decides to test out Libra's new weapon. Libra summons a bunch of cannons and decimates a nearby mountain in one shot. Lufasu estimates that a single shot could destroy all 7 luminaries, and she suddenly regrets giving Libra the weapon. We cut over to the upper atmosphere of Midgard, where the Demon King had managed to track down a flying ship. The captain of the ship confronts him and asks him what he wants. The Demon King tells the captain that he wants the treasure hidden in the ship. He reveals the captain to be Castor, half of the Gemini of the 12 heavenly stars. The Demon King tells Castor that all he desires is the key to the heavens. Castor denies his request, saying that his master Lufasu is the only one who can enter heaven. He tells the Demon King that he's below Lufasu, but not him. The Demon King is amused that a level 800 member of the 12 heavenly stars thinks that they could beat him, but Castor tells him that battles aren't determined by the strength of individuals, and are instead determined by the strength of their army. He uses his skill Argonautai and unleashes his army upon the Demon King. Argonautai is a skill that Castor shares with his sister Pollux. Pollux would summon the spirits of ancient heroes, and Castor would control them. The Demon King's army is wiped out, and he's impressed that all of the spirits are at least level 500, and that some of them are even level 1000 just like him. Castor then unleashes his skill, the god with 50 names, creating a giant lightning strike, ending the battle. Castor is satisfied that he managed to protect the key to the heavens, and he explains how it is a world-destroying threat given to him 200 years ago by Lufasu. Castor and his army are suddenly shocked, as a giant circle suddenly appeared before them. We cut back to Lufasu's group, where everyone is cringing at Scorpius cuddling Lufasu. Libra suddenly pulls Scorpius off, and the two of them start arguing. Scorpius then asks about Dina and Virgo, and Carcinus wonders the same thing. Lufasu introduces Virgo as the successor to Parthenos, and Dina as a random background character, which greatly upsets her. Virgo suddenly starts to feel useless, since she's so low-leveled compared to everyone else. Lufasu states that Virgo only had contact with the 12 heavenly stars who are all extremely powerful. However, her current level of 320 is actually quite remarkable compared to the rest of the world. The group's vehicle suddenly stops as a bunch of people started walking by. Lufasu asks Dina where they are headed, and she tells her that it's towards the direction of Dropner, a country of beast folk that was invaded by Emperor Dubhe of the 7 heroes. Dubhe was a polar bear beast folk and referred to as the Beast King. He united all the beast folk together despite their different races and was hailed as the emperor. However, Lufasu observes that there are also non-beast folk members among the crowd, and Scorpius explains to her that they're all planning a hunting festival where they would release wild beasts that were captured and compete against each other to see who can hunt the most. Lufasu is surprised that Scorpius knew about this, and Scorpius answers that she was planning on releasing monsters into the festival after she took over Blutgang, which makes Lufasu relieved that she managed to retrieve Scorpius in time. Lufasu then tells Virgo to participate in the festival, which shocks her. Lufasu pats Virgo on the head and reassures her that she will get stronger, which seems to please Virgo. We change over to the perspective of the heroes' party, where they've just finished registering for the hunting festival. Say explains why they're in Dropner, flashing back to his conversation with Migres. Migres tells Say that way back in time, there was no mana in the land, and it was all gathered by the winged folk. The mana they gathered became the golden apple. When one of them took a bite of it, the goddess got angry and turned the winged folk into a human, while the others were stripped of the power to gather mana. Migres thinks that there were also some winged folk that ate an apple that weren't caught, and that their descendants were luckily born with white wings which allowed them to hide their sin. However, one of their descendants regained the power to gather mana and had black wings as a result. The person is none other than Lufasu Mafahl. However, Migres states that all of that is just a theory.
A game theory!
But Migres does confirm that Lufasu has the power to create the golden apple, which was what allowed the 7 heroes to become so strong. Migres asks Say what he makes of all the information he learned, and if he understands why he had asked for his companions to leave the room. Say thinks back to how his party came to figure out a way to get stronger, however that method turned out to be from Lufasu, using an apple that represents sin. That information would be too much for the rest of his party to handle. Migres tells Sei that he'll have to tell his party eventually, and they'll look at him as a madman as a result. He asks Sei what drives him to continue on his path. Sei tells Migres that his father was once a policeman. However, one day, he arrested an innocent person. The evidence and the witnesses turned out to all be fake, and his father had wanted to launch a reinvestigation. However, everyone else brushed it aside and insisted that his father had caught the correct person. The person that was arrested ended up taking his own life as a result, which then in turn led to Sei's father quitting his job out of guilt. Sei tells Migres that no matter what, you should always do the right thing. Migres smiles, understanding why Sei was chosen as the hero, and he asks him what his next plan is. Sei tells Migres that he wants to meet Lufasu, and Migres tells him to head over to Dropner, since he can gather a lot of information from all the participants. The flashback ends, and Sei is surprised that Dropner's capital is just an open field. Sei's party member, whose name I forgot, points out a certain group, which just so happens to be Lufasu's group. Virgo catches Sei's attention, and I think I know what the writer is going for here. The guy whose name I forgot noogies Sei on his head and asks him if he likes the girl with the white wings. Sei blushes and denies the claim. We cut to the next day, and the hunting festival has begun. The announcer declares participant 760 as first place by a long mile. It turned out to be Virgo, and Sei feels dejected at how weak he is compared to her. The announcer then explains the rules of the festival. Participants should try to kill as many of the released monsters as they can. Each type of monster has been assigned points based on their strength, and whoever has the most amount of points by the end wins. Virgo is confused at how weak the monsters all seem to be, and it causes her to gain a lot more confidence. Participants suddenly scream at an accident that occurred. A giant dinosaur that lives nearby managed to break into the festival grounds, and Sei is shocked that this world has dinosaurs. The giant dinosaur charges at Sei, but Virgo blocks the attack and saves him. She then strikes the dinosaur, damaging it greatly. Sei decides to help out and attacks the dinosaur by its feet. He uses his hero skill, Sword of Light, and it causes the dinosaur to stumble back. Virgo then dashes in, and Sei assists her by buffing her with Sword of Light, and the dinosaur is killed. Sei and Virgo introduce themselves to each other. The dinosaur suddenly gets back up, startling them. It suddenly drops dead, confusing them both. Off in the distance, it turns that Libra was the one who had sniped the dinosaur. However, Libra tells Lufasu that it wasn't her who made the shot. She tells Lufasu that an arrow had pierced the dinosaur's head right before her bullet hit. Libra tells Lufasu that she thinks that it might be the archer of the 12 heavenly stars. Lufasu thinks to Sagittarius, the archer of the 12 heavenly stars. He specializes in ranged attacks, and is the only being who's able to snipe something faster than Libra. Lufasu thinks to how Dino wasn't even able to find Sagittarius, and wonders why he'd make an appearance now. Later that night, Virgo is treated to a feast for winning the hunting festival. Libra suddenly informs Lufasu of someone outside of their base. It turned out to be a fox beastkin, who tells Lufasu's group that he's under orders from the Emperor to gather all the participants who've done well in the festival. Lufasu asks Virgo what she thinks of it, and she answers that she'd like to go and help out. Lufasu tells the rest of her group that they're no longer leaving Dropner tomorrow, since Sagittarius might be near the area. She then tells Aries that she has something else planned for him. We flash forward to the next day with the 5 best performing participants of the hunting festival all gathered together. Sei observes the other participants and is suspicious of the one in the cloak. Someone suddenly appears before the group, introducing themselves as Captain Kainiko of Dropner. He turned out to be a cat, and he asks the group if they'd be willing to help the country of Dropner with an official request to recover an object from a specific location. Virgo asks Kainiko what he needs them to recover, and he tells the group that he wants them to climb Mount Nitjorg and recover the elixir at the summit. 2 of the members are shocked, as the elixir is a legendary item that was said to have been lost 200 years ago because of the Demon King. Virgo asks Kainiko why he needs the elixir, and he answers that their country's guardian dragon has fallen ill. The elixir is the only thing that can save it. If the guardian dragon dies, then their country will be lost to the demons. Sei asks Kainiko if the elixir could heal legs that can't move anymore, and he answers that it's definitely possible. Sei thinks to Migres, and how he could give him a drop of the elixir to heal him. One of the cat guards suddenly emits a dark aura, and is surprised that the country of Dropner still has the elixir. He states that the elixir is a massive threat, since it could potentially heal the 7 heroes. He undoes his transformation, revealing himself to be a demon. The demon attacks the group with a water creation, but Virgo manages to protect everyone with her force barrier. The demon is surprised that she's strong enough to oppose him, and he decides to retreat. Kainiko recognizes the water magic used by the demon, and recognizes him as Mercurius, the luminary of water. He explains how Mercurius' entire body is made up of water, which makes him immune to physical attacks. The other 2 high-ranking participants from the festival gets terrified at the thought of fighting one of the 7 luminaries and dips. Sei tells Kainiko that it would probably be better for the country to send their troops to the mountain instead, but Kainiko tells him that Mount Nipjorg is surrounded by a holy barrier that repels magical beasts and beast folks. Fortunately, the barrier will also keep the demons out, but they'll definitely try targeting it now that they know that the elixir exists. The rest of Sei's party shows up and offers their assistance. Kainiko recognizes them all as Sword Saint Friedrich, Gantz the Mercenary, and Hawkeye. He's especially happy at seeing Friedrich again, and it turns out that Kainiko is actually his older brother. Kainiko learns from Friedrich about Sei being the hero and is honored to have him help out. Virgo also offers her assistance, and Kainiko proceeds to guide everyone over to Mount Nipjorg. We cut over to Libra and Karkinos, who have split up from the rest of Lufasu's party to search for Sagittarius. Someone suddenly calls out Libra and steps out from the shadows. Karkinos recognizes the guy from the hunting festival, but Libra sees through his disguise and identifies him as Sagittarius. He undoes his transformation and reveals himself as Sagittarius of the marksman from the 12 heavenly stars. Sagittarius tells Libra and Karkinos that he's currently working together with Leon the Lion of the 12 heavenly stars. Libra referred to Leon as the one who held no loyalty towards Lufasu and only worked for her to potentially find a chance to overthrow her. Libra asks Sagittarius why, and he brings up his species of the centaurs. Centaurs are half man and half horse, but are still treated as monsters. He asks Libra if she knows why, and Libra tells him it's because centaurs are not bipedal. Sagittarius tells Libra that Leon has gathered other creatures who were classified as monsters and has also reached level 1000. Leon plans to take over the world and give monsters more rights. Libra warns Sagittarius and tells him that he'll be forgiven if he returns to Lufasu. If he continues to follow Leon, however, then he will be seen as a threat and disposed of. Sagittarius apologizes, saying that he's already made his decision. He'll do anything for his people, even if it means becoming Lufasu's enemy. He attacks Libra with Cause Media, a bow gifted to him by Lufasu 200 years ago that can change the elements of spells casted by the wielder. Libra grabs Karkinos and uses him as a shield. She then retaliates by firing a volley of bullets, which Sagittarius manages to dodge. The battle continues, with Libra constantly dragging Karkinos around and using him as a shield. Sagittarius fires one last arrow and manages to disappear from the battlefield. Libra replays her footage and finds out that Sagittarius grabbed onto the arrow he fired and used it to escape. We cut back to the heroes' party at Mount Nipjorg. Cruz is amazed by all the mana crystals inside the mountain, and Sei notes how it looks like a dungeon from an RPG. The hooded figure brings up a question and asks if the vice captain is alright since they're a gorilla beast folk who shouldn't be allowed through the barrier. Hawkeye points out the vice captain just looks like a gorilla, and the vice captain ends up sucker punching him in the face for that remark. The gang suddenly hears some noise, and Cruz yells at everyone to get behind him. A gush of water suddenly crashes towards the group, and Cruz manages to protect everyone with a barrier. Cruz infers that the demons must have broken through the barrier, and his barrier starts to break open. Virgo uses her skill Vendemiatrix, and the water all disappears. Virgo is relieved that the skill Parthenos had taught her worked, but Cruz ends up recognizing the skill as mana depletion, saying that it's a technique that can only be used by the goddess and those who were blessed by her. Cruz gets up to Virgo's face and tells her that not even the king of the winged folk are able to use mana depletion. The rest of the party pulls Cruz off, and Say tells him to back off. The group continues forward, and Mercurius would keep sending water after them to no avail, as Virgo would keep intercepting the attack. The hooded figure notes how the hero is weak, but impressive. He turned out to be Ares, who Lufasu had entrusted to support Virgo. He thinks to how Virgo is similar to what he used to be like, someone who's surrounded by far stronger people, and ended up having no confidence. The other heavenly stars have all started out very strong, so none of them understands his feelings. Ares could easily defeat Mercurius, but he holds back since that won't be helping Virgo. The group finally reaches the summit where the elixir is held, and Ares smiles thinking about how his party had a ton of those elixirs at the Black-Winged Tomb, which are now all stored in their tower. The party reaches an empty room, where they've managed to corner Mercurius, who's holding the elixir. Say tells Mercurius to hand over the elixir, but Mercurius ignores him and asks Virgo for her identity. He notes how she managed to erase all of his magic, and that he won't allow someone that powerful to be left alive. Members of the party attacks Mercurius, but he easily repels all of them. Virgo manages to heal them back up instantly, much to his shock. Say then gets behind Mercurius and unleashes his hero skill Magic Break, which is an attack that directly targets someone's magic power. Mercurius manages to block the attack, and he sends Say flying back. Virgo, however, uses this opportunity to fly in and actually damage Mercurius. Cruz notes how they normally wouldn't stand a chance against a member of the Seven Luminaries, but luckily the barrier is weakening Mercurius. Mercurius figures out the group's strategy. The front lines and the ones behind are buying time, while Virgo goes in to attack and heal, while Say would attack Mercurius with his hero skills. Although Say is only level 35, he's about as strong as Gantz, who's at level 82. Mercurius notes him as a threat that needs to be eliminated as soon as possible, but Virgo would keep protecting Say from his attacks. Mercurius is annoyed at Virgo constantly healing up any damage he deals to the group, but he's determined to win, as even dolls like the demons have things they want to protect. He thinks of Luna, and it's time to insert the tragic backstory for the villains that no one cares about. Mercurius seems to have known that demons were made up on magic and created to oppose humanity. He had always wondered what would happen once humanity has been destroyed, and he came to the conclusion that the demons will simply just vanish. But if they don't fight against humanity, then they'll vanish as well. Luna meets up with Mercurius, and he's surprised to see her having lighter skin and hair color. Luna blushes and tells him that it's just to disguise herself as a human. Mercurius sees through her lie, however, and figures out that Luna is simply trying to look more like Terra to get closer to him. Luna tells Mercurius that Terra is currently assembling all the luminaries, and she takes her leave. Mercurius grips his fist, noting to himself that Terra needs to explode. Mercurius meets with the Demon King and requests for him to use the key to the heavens on the demons. The Demon King is surprised that Mercurius knew he had the key and asks what he wants it for. Mercurius tells him that it's fine if he just saves Luna and offers to kill the guardian dragon of Dropner in exchange for Luna's safety. We cut back to the battle where Mercurius is at his limit. He's still determined to win, however, even if it means having to sell his soul to the goddess. Meanwhile, I'm over here wondering why he couldn't just destroy the elixir right now or use it on himself instead. A voice suddenly speaks out to him, asking if he wants more power. Mercurius recognizes the owner of the voice as the goddess, and he asks her to grant him strength. He suddenly starts emitting light, and Cruz is shocked that a demon is somehow using divine power. Mercurius begs Terra to take care of Luna, as his body becomes pure water. Ares suddenly takes off his disguise and intercepts the water. Gantz recognizes Ares from back when they met in Seoul, and Ares tells Virgo to go back to Lufasu. Virgo, however, begs Ares to help the others as well, but he's hesitant as the hero is supposed to be Lufasu's enemy. He gives in to Virgo's request and tells her to take the others and run. Ares is frustrated at the water constantly regenerating and decides it's time to go all out. Kaneko and Friedrich are scared of what's occurring on the mountain, but Say's party runs over to the duo with the elixir in their hands. Say thinks back to how Virgo had handed them the elixir before returning to the mountain, and he decides to return to the mountain as well. Gantz holds him back, however, as the group suddenly see Ares transformed, fighting with Mercurius. Gantz tells Sei that the 12 heavenly stars are at least level 800, which are far stronger than the level 307 luminaries. Cruz suddenly starts freaking out, as the rest of the heavenly stars all transform as well. He thinks that they came here to fight Virgo, and he passes out at the sight of Lufasu, who's flying above the heavenly stars. The heavenly stars undo their transformation and bow to Lufasu. She recaps what happened, starting with the mountain randomly spitting out water and Ares transforming. The others saw what happened and followed suit. Lufasu suddenly notices the hero's party looking all terrified. She's then surprised at Sei stepping forward, as he goes up to Lufasu and asks to have a chat. Lufasu is intrigued by Sei's bravery, and she accepts Sei's request. Sei first asks Lufasu if she's planning on doing anything to the country of Dropner, and she answers that she's only in the country to train up her subordinate. Sei realizes that Virgo is her subordinate as he saw her hanging around Lufasu's group earlier, and he tells Lufasu that she's currently fighting with one of the 7 luminaries. Sei's ashamed that he had to leave her to fight alone, and he asks Lufasu to help them. Lufasu agrees with no hesitation, surprising Sei. He realizes that the legends of Lufasu were blown out of proportion, but he immediately takes back that statement upon seeing her easily take out some of the water attacks from Mercurius. However, it turns out that Lufasu is actually extremely glad to be on positive terms with Sei, since the goddess could easily boost his strength to an immense level due to him being the hero. Lufasu greets Gantz, who had realized that she was actually the Sufala girl she met back in Suval. Hawkeye finds Lufasu to be familiar, so she tells Dina to remove the memory manipulation on Jean. Wait, his name is Jean? The group of adventurers introduce themselves as a warrior class and the leader Jean, a light warrior Nick, a heavy warrior Richard, and an archer Shu. Now make sure you jot down these names, because they're not going to be important at all.
End of flashback.
Well, we're still going to be calling him Hawkeye, because it sounds cooler. Anyways, with the memory manipulation removed, Hawkeye suddenly regains all of his memories of what occurred back in Lufasu's tomb. Lufasu tells the rest of the group to follow her to go help Virgo, as she picks up Sei and flies off with the rest of the group levitating behind her. Virgo and Ares are still fighting Mercurius when Lufasu and the others arrive. Ares undoes his transformation and apologizes to Lufasu for being unable to win. Lufasu thinks to how both she and Ego Karos are able to easily end the battle, but she decides to use this opportunity to give Virgo the glory instead. She uses her skill Esper and condenses all the water into a small crystal that Cruz identifies as the legendary Mana Diamond. Lufasu tells Virgo to finish it off, and Virgo uses her skill Vendemiatrix to destroy the diamond and causing Cruz to lose his mind. Lufasu praises Virgo and pats her on the head, which makes her very happy. Meanwhile, back at the Demon King's castle, the Demon King thinks to the recent events with Mercurius. It turns out that everything was actually set up by him, as someone suddenly asks him if something was bothering him. It turned out to be Dina, and the Demon King thinks back to Mercurius's determination to save Luna and asks Dina if the demons really were just dolls. Dina affirms that they are, and they'll always be dolls to be used and discarded, even if they could grow feelings for others. The Demon King then asks if he'll be discarded as well, and Dina answers that perhaps he already has been. The news of Mercurius's death reaches Luna, as she hugs Terra while crying upon hearing the news. Back at Dropner, Sei explains how the kingdom had rewarded them for the defeat of Mercurius and recovery of the elixir. Sei adds that he was summoned by the Emperor and was almost married off to his daughter. The group and Virgo are now currently heading to the location of the Guardian Dragon. Kainiko finally leads them to the location, but the group becomes horrified at the sight of the Guardian Dragon laying dead on the ground. Kainiko becomes enraged, demanding to know who did such a thing. The perpetrators stood on top of its corpse, and Kainiko demands them to get away from the dragon and calls them monsters. The group confirms that they are indeed monsters, as they're revealed to be a group of demi-humans. The insect demi-human asks how they're meant to be different from the humans. They want to negotiate, as they are all able to communicate with words and should be considered no different than the humans. Sei actually finds himself agreeing with the demi-human, but Kainiko interjects, calling them all monsters and denouncing the idea of negotiation. The demi-humans become enraged upon being called monsters, as they all declare their loyalty to Leon. Cruz freaks out upon hearing that name, and he explains to say that Leon the Lion is a member of the 12 heavenly stars. He was also once one of the 4 strongest beings who kept balance in the world before the rise of Lufasu, and is the strongest member of the 12 heavenly stars. The plant demi-human corrects Cruz, saying that Leon had already left the 12 heavenly stars long ago, and has got back to level 1000, giving him the ability to destroy all of humanity and the demons. The demi-humans then charge at the group and struck down Kainiko. Friedrich charges in to attack, but his attack is blocked by the insect demi-human. The plant demi-human laughs at how weak Friedrich is and knocks him aside. Sei is shocked, as Friedrich is supposed to be humanity's strongest sword saint. Although Friedrich is at level 120, the other demi-humans all turn out to be stronger. The group is all taken out except for Virgo. The snakefolk notes that Virgo is significantly higher level than the others. However, she's lacking in experience. She grabs Virgo by the leg, and the merman goes in and struck her down. Sei catches Virgo before she hits the ground, and the snakefolk unleashes her aqua blast attack on the duo. Sei shuts his eyes, but he gets surprised at a sudden harpoon that saved them from the attack. The owner turned out to be a battered-up Castor, as he stood in front of the duo. The insect folk notes that Castor is strong, but the plant folk and merman are confident that they can beat him since he's already very beaten up. They all charge at him, and Castor unleashes his skill ptarmigan and strikes down the entire group. The insect folk tells the group to retreat, since they've already completed their objective. The plant folk summons some wind and carries all the demi-humans away. Virgo then uses high healing on the guardian dragon, but it had no effect. Kainiko suggests using every single drop of the elixir, but Sei is hesitant as he had originally wanted to use it to help heal Migrez's legs. He then thinks back to what his dad had said in the past and decides to use up all of the elixir on the dragon. However, it still ended up having no effect, and Cruz explains that the elixir would only work on living beings. Kainiko pleads with Virgo to help since she is acquainted with Lufasu. However, Virgo apologizes for not being to help as she's the weakest among Lufasu's group. Castor asks Virgo if she knows Lufasu. Virgo said she does, and Castor smiles. He takes out a potion and uses it on the guardian dragon. He explains that it's called Amrita, a potion that can revive someone after death. The dragon is revived, and Kainiko cries out tears of joy and thanks Castor for his help. Castor then introduces himself as one of the twins from the 12 heavenly stars, which surprises everyone except for Virgo. The guardian dragon suddenly lets out a loud roar and stands up strongly. Castor reunites with Lufasu, and she's curious as to why he's not with his fairy sibling as opposed to the games where they were always together. Castor of the twins from the 12 heavenly stars joins the party, and all of his stats are displayed on screen. Lufasu asks Castor why he's so worn out, and Castor kneels down and apologizes for losing the key to the heavens to the Demon King. Lufasu, however, has no idea what that even is, and tells Dina to heal up Castor's wounds. Meanwhile, the rest of the heavenly stars are discussing the current situation with Leon and Sagittarius. They're not surprised by Leon's actions, but they are confused as to why someone like Sagittarius would be assisting Leon. Lufasu decides that her next objective is to retrieve Sagittarius and Leon, as the rest of the heroes' party suddenly arrive. Lufasu tells Sei that she needs to stop Leon as she's responsible for her subordinates' actions. Both Gantz and Hawkeye offers to help, but Lufasu has doubts since she's not sure if they'd even survive the shockwaves caused from her battle with Leon. Dina informs Lufasu that Leon's base is most likely located in Turfing. Dina explains to Lufasu that Turfing is located in the most dangerous area inside the human territory, as it's located right next to the demon territory. Sagittarius's hometown of Kentoros is also located inside of Turfing. Lufasu tells Sei to leave Leon to her, and that Sei should go over to Kentoros and investigate. The group splits up, with Lufasu and the Heavenly Stars headed to Turfing while the heroes' party along with Virgo and Castor would be heading towards Kentoros. Meanwhile, in the vampire country of Mjolnir, a vampire girl senses Lufasu's presence. She is determined to finally kill Lufasu this time. She's revealed to be Bennett Nash, a level 1000 vampire princess with the life goal of killing Lufasu, and the final member of the 7 heroes that are currently alive. Lufasu's party is currently headed towards Turfing to stop Leon, while the heroes' party is headed to Centaurus to investigate Sagittarius. Lufasu's group runs into a problem, as the country of Mjolnir is within the vicinity. It's a country of vampires governed by Bennett Nash of the 7 heroes. Ares asks about Lufasu and Bennett Nash's history, and Ego Karos explains to him that Lufasu had beaten Bennett Nash in the past, which had caused her to become obsessed with Lufasu. Bennett Nash the vampire is the strongest of the 7 heroes, and the only one of the heroes who've retained her strength from her prime. She's currently sitting at level 1000 and obsessed with killing Lufasu, making her a massive threat. The sole reason that the demons haven't taken over the rest of the human civilization is simply because Bennett Nash is residing right by their territory. The demons had attempted to invade Mjolnir in the past, sending thousands of their strongest warriors varying from level 700 to lower levels. Bennett Nash, however, was able to eliminate them all in a single night. Something suddenly crashes onto the roof of their vehicle, and Lufasu goes out to check it out. A girl sat on the roof, happy to see Lufasu again after 200 years. It turned out to be Bennett Nash, smiling at the sight of Lufasu. Lufasu notes that Bennett Nash hasn't changed at all, and she answers that time has basically stopped for her. She suddenly stops Libra's attack without even flinching. Scorpius and Ego Karos jumps above Bennett Nash, but she easily repels them without a struggle. Lufasu notes that Bennett Nash is way too fast, managing to counter the heavenly stars like they were nothing. Lufasu panics, as it's the first time she's been unable to keep up with someone in this body. Lufasu tells Ego Karos and Scorpius to stand down, and Bennett Nash noted that as a wise decision while tossing an envelope at Lufasu. Bennett Nash tells Lufasu it's an invitation to her castle, as she wants to have a one-on-one fight with Lufasu. Lufasu accepts her invitation, and Bennett Nash smiles, telling Lufasu that they'll be fighting to the death. Bennett Nash flew away, and Lufasu is curious about the reasoning for Bennett Nash's obsession with her. Which means it's now time for a flashback to 200 years ago. Before the rise of Lufasu, the power balance of the world was maintained by 4 people known as the 4 Pillars. Those being the Demon King Olm, the Dragon King Layden, the Lion King Leon, and the Vampire Princess Bennett Nash. Despite being the same race, Bennett Nash saw the other vampires as inferior, and she sought out other powerful creatures to fight. She went on a rampage across the continents, and there was eventually no one left that's strong enough to fight her. She was only level 600 when a sudden shift occurred in the world. The Dragon King ended up being subdued by Lufasu, who then also came to erase the vampire clan. Lufasu ended up easily defeating Bennett Nash, which would end up being the first time she's ever encountered someone stronger than her. Bennett Nash, however, found the feeling of being defeated as something pleasant, and she decided to accompany Lufasu and became one of the 7 heroes. After joining, Bennett Nash would finally find joy in fighting, as everyone around her was just as strong as she is. Bennett Nash would eventually reach level 1000, with a determination to kill Lufasu. The two of them would finally have a rematch once Lufasu conquered the world. However, Lufasu would suddenly be betrayed. It turned out to be the other heroes, who were all emulating heavenly power. Migrez binds Bennett Nash, and Lufasu leaves her to go fight against the heroes. Bennett Nash doesn't want her to go, but Lufasu reassures Bennett Nash that everything will be fine. The end result, however, would be Lufasu's defeat at the hands of the 7 heroes. The other heroes would go to Bennett Nash after the battle to request aid in the fight against the Demon King. Bennett Nash, however, refuses and tells them all to leave. She would then end up shutting herself off from the rest of the world until around 50 years after Lufasu's death. The demons launched an attack on her country, which she was able to repel. Bennett Nash then met up with the Demon King, who was appalled at her strength. He notes that the 7 heroes would have probably won against him if she were there in the battle. Bennett Nash, however, is just confused as to why the Demon King isn't fighting with his full strength. He suddenly informs her that Lufasu will return after 150 years and tells Bennett Nash to wait until then as he disappears into a portal. Bennett Nash grinned at the news, and her determination returns. We then return to Lufasu, who's currently exploring Mjolnir. She didn't want to risk being attacked by both Leon and Bennett Nash, so she decided to split off from the 12 heavenly stars and left the situation with Leon to them. Bennett Nash suddenly appears behind Lufasu, angry that she's sightseeing instead of going straight to her. Lufasu tells Bennett Nash to show her around the city first, and she finds it weird that she doesn't feel nervous around Bennett Nash. Despite how dangerous she is, Lufasu would get a pleasant vibe from her. The country of Mjolnir is always dark because of Bennett Nash's magic, and all the manual labor is done by zombies rather than the vampires. Bennett Nash would eventually take Lufasu to a special mansion she had built for a special day that allowed people to fight without worrying about the surroundings. Lufasu realizes that it was not a tourist spot, and Bennett Nash apologizes for being so impatient. She turns to Lufasu and prepares for battle. Lufasu is conflicted, since Bennett Nash's defeat would put humanity in a terrible position, but Bennett Nash laughs, as she is determined to fight Lufasu to the death. Lufasu dodges Bennett Nash's kick, which ends up tearing through the mansion. Lufasu retaliates with a punch that ends up breaking Bennett Nash's arm. She then heals it back up instantly with her vampire regeneration. Lufasu is hopeful about winning. However, Bennett Nash tells her that the attack was far too weak compared to what she's capable of. She then gets angry as she assumes that Lufasu is holding back. Lufasu thinks back to what the Demon King had told her, and realizes that she's still nowhere near as strong as the real Lufasu was 200 years ago. Bennett Nash assumes that Lufasu wants her to go all out first, and she decides to use the technique Lufasu had taught her and unleash her true power. She thanks Lufasu and suddenly ascends to level 1,500, shocking Lufasu as the level cap of the world is supposed to be 1,000. Bennett Nash suddenly vanishes, and Lufasu realizes that she has simply become way too fast for her to keep up with. She starts to really panic, as it's the first time she's ever facing a challenging fight ever since becoming Lufasu. Bennett Nash uses her skill Hrungnir's stone arm and strikes Lufasu. Lufasu starts to lose consciousness, realizing that Bennett Nash had become far stronger compared to when they first met. She suddenly gets confused, as the real Lufasu's memories starts to intertwine with hers. Lufasu suddenly smiles, happy at the fact that Bennett Nash had become so strong. Bennett Nash smiles in joy, as Lufasu begins to unleash her true power. Lufasu tells her that she knew she'd be the one to awaken her, confusing Bennett Nash. Lufasu smiles at the sight of everything going according to her plan and thanks Bennett Nash. Her stats are displayed, revealing her to be at level 3,000. Bennett Nash excitedly charges in to strike Lufasu, but Lufasu easily blocks the attack. She then proceeded to flick Bennett Nash with a single finger and sent her flying. Lufasu notes how her current level of 3,000 is only about 70% of her full power, but it should be more than enough. She summons her weapon Reaver's Rush and slices off Bennett Nash's arm along with a chunk of the moon. Bennett Nash immediately reattaches her arm and retaliates with her skill Luna Shooter, which Lufasu manages to counter with her soul bullet attack. Lufasu then slices Bennett Nash in half, which she manages to barely recover from. The two of them then charge at each other, and Bennett Nash gets frustrated that she still is no match for Lufasu. A voice suddenly speaks out to Bennett Nash, telling her that she can make her stronger. Bennett Nash finally realizes that this was how the 7 heroes were able to defeat Lufasu, and she tells the voice to get lost. Bennett Nash tells the voice that no one asked for her help, and that she wants to win using her own power. She repels the goddess Alovenus and tells her to get lost. Bennett Nash regains consciousness and apologizes to Lufasu for making her wait. Lufasu is impressed at Bennett Nash's level of strength, and Bennett Nash smiles at the compliment. The two of them are prepared to go all out, as Bennett Nash prepares to unleash her strongest attack. Bennett Nash unleashes her skill, Maiden's Silver Arrow, which summons a giant arrow from the sky, determined to wipe out all of Midgard. Bennett Nash is confident in taking down Lufasu, since she won't be able to dodge the attack without Midgard being wiped out. However, she suddenly gets shocked upon seeing how Lufasu had managed to catch the attack with a single arm. She hurled the attack back into the sky, and it ended up demolishing a nearby planet. Lufasu then uses her transmutation skill to create a world-shattering beast that fires a beam at Bennett Nash. The attack greatly injured Bennett Nash, and she comes to realize that the result of the fight will be exactly like the past. The two of them prepare for one final strike, and they both charge full force at each other. The outcome ended with Bennett Nash being pierced by Lufasu's sword. Bennett Nash reminisces to the past, when she had traveled with the 7 heroes, missing those days. Lufasu hugs onto Bennett Nash, and Bennett Nash asks her if she'll really be able to change the world. Lufasu reassures Bennett Nash, saying that one of her girl subordinates is doing a great job. Way to keep everyone is suspense, huh? Lufasu tells Bennett Nash that when she was just a young girl, the vampire princess had already been known as humanity's strongest. Lufasu had always wanted to be like her, and she was actually the one who declared their rivalry first. Bennett Nash smiles and passes away in Lufasu's arms. The rest of the vampires rush in the room, and Lufasu informs them all of what had happened. The other vampires cradle onto Bennett Nash's body as Lufasu leaves the scene. Lufasu leaves the country, and she suddenly regains consciousness. She realized that the real Lufasu took over her body, and she starts to get really confused on whether she's absorbing in the real Lufasu, or if the real Lufasu was absorbing her. Meanwhile, in an unknown area, Dino watched over everything that transpired, as she starts to script out everything that would happen. Anyways, we cut over to turfing, where the 12 heavenly stars have all been taken out. Scorpius informs their attacker that she had poisoned them. Their attacker turned out to be the level 1000 Lion King Leon, who is confident that he'll be able to kill everyone before the poison kicks in. Ares attacks Leon, but Leon ignores him and goes after Libra. Libra unleashes her Brachium attack, but Leon manages to tank the attack. Libra then enters her Astrea formation with all her blasters, catching Leon off guard. Leon turns to Sagittarius, who then proceeds to use his skill Almazal to hit Libra with an arrow. Leon suddenly appears in front of Libra, and she deduces that he grabbed onto Sagittarius's arrow and moved with it. Leon slams Libra to the ground, but Karkinos suddenly jumps in front of Libra to tank the final punch. He then counters with his skill Akbens, which makes Leon angry. Sagittarius warns Leon to not attack, but Leon ignores his warning and charges in anyways. Leon unleashes a fury of attacks at Karkinos, which he manages to all counter at Leon. Both Leon and Karkinos end up being heavily injured, and Agokaros and Scorpius both takes this opportunity to charge in and attack Leon. Leon staggers back, hating the fact that he's losing, which means that it's time for another flashback. In the past, Leon had always considered himself as the strongest and looked down at everyone else. Even when news of the Dragon King's defeat reached him, he never even gave it another thought. However, he would soon come to regret that, as he'd end up being defeated by none other than Lufasu. Leon then became a member of Lufasu's 12 heavenly stars, and he found it to be incredibly humiliating to be put on the same level as people like Ares and the rest of the heavenly stars. Leon eventually gained a determination to kill Lufasu and reclaim his title as the strongest. However, once Lufasu was defeated by the 7 heroes, Leon would lose his purpose and discard his title as one of the 12 heavenly stars. He'd seclude himself and 8 other adventurers and demons that got close. However, that would cause the other monsters to think that he was providing them with protection. They started worshipping Leon as their king, and Leon realized that he can actually surpass Lufasu if he manages to rule over the world, as it's something that even she wasn't capable of doing. We end the flashback as a voice speaks out to Leon, asking him if he wants to become stronger. Leon accepts the offer in a heartbeat, and he unleashes his true form as the Nemean lion. We rewind time and cut over to the heroes' party currently riding Lufasu's RV. Sei is very confused as to what an RV is doing in this world. He had asked Lufasu about it, and all she told him was that she has some information about the world Sei came from. Virgo gets concerned and suddenly gets in front of Sei's face. Sei starts blushing, and the RV responds to the situation by separating the two of them. In the distance, a mysterious figure spies on the RV as it passes by. The heroes' party finally arrives at the demi-human forest where Centaurus Village is located. Castor tells everyone that the demi-humans aren't fond of humans, and he hands everyone a potion to drink. He tells them that the potion uses a spell called illusion, which allows people to change their appearance. Everyone takes the potion, and they all transform. Say turns into an ogre. Virgo turns into an insect demi-human. Gantz becomes a rhinoceros beetle demi-human. Hawkeye turns into a centaur. Kainiko turns into a cat. Cruz turns into a grasshopper demi-human. And both the captain and vice captain become weird demi-human hybrids. Say decides to have the two of them stay behind as they stand out too much. The group arrives at Centaurus, but two guards stop them at the entrance. The village elder, Dobby, comes out and mistakes the group for Leon's subordinates. Gantz tells Dobby that they're just demi-humans running away from the humans, and Dobby immediately apologizes for the misunderstanding. Gantz is confused since he thought that all the demi-humans were under Leon, but Dobby reveals that their chief Sagittarius had initially refused to help Leon. However, Leon threatened to burn down all of Centaurus, so Sagittarius reluctantly agreed to help. Gantz asks why they couldn't just run away, and Dobby tells him that Leon's subordinates are all guarding the village with no hesitation to execute anyone who tries to escape. Dobby takes the group to his home, and he confronts them about not actually being demi-humans. He singles out Hawkeye, saying that his footsteps matches the sound of a creature with only 2 legs. Dobby deduces that the group are actually humans, and that they're here to investigate the demi-humans in preparations for war. Cruz admits that they're humans, but tells Dobby that they just came to investigate why Sagittarius is working for Leon. He holds Dobby's hand, and tells him that they'll be freeing all the centaurs. A centaur suddenly rushes over, telling Dobby that Sage's troops have arrived at the entrance. Say wonders who that is, and Dobby tells him that he's a spider demi-human in charge of the village. Dobby goes out to meet the other demi-humans, and Sages tells him that disguised humans have been spotted inside the village. Dobby denies those claims, triggering the plant demi-human. Sages then brings up how there are kids living in the village, which gives the plant demi-human a plan. She suggests to just kill one of the kids, and grabs one of the kids hiding nearby. Sages, however, stops her, saying that the centaurs are still their allies. The plant demi-human calls him too generous, saying that it disgusts her, and it'll be fine if they were to kill a single hostage. Someone suddenly swoops in and slices off her arm, saving the child. The child was about to thank them, but screams in terror at the sight of both Friedrich and the vice captain. The vice captain charges at the plant demi-human, and she screams in terror at the sight of how disgusting she is. Say and the others decide to join in the fight as well, as they each face off against a different opponent. Say goes up against Sages, the captain and vice captain against the plant demi-human, Virgo against the snake demi-human, and Castor against the merman. We cut back to the battle against Leon, and Libra identifies that Leon has received the goddess's buff. Ares attacks him with Mesartheme, but Leon easily flicks him away, telling him that someone as weak as him should stand aside. He then prepares a beam to decimate the rest of the 12 heavenly stars, but Sagittarius jumps in front of the attack and tells everyone to grab onto him. He manages to escape with the heavenly stars, however Ares ended up being left behind. Leon turns to Ares and tells him that Lufasu was the one who gave him power, and that he's disgusted that Ares was considered the same rank as the rest of the 12 heavenly stars. He then walks away, leaving Ares in a feeling of distraught. Meanwhile, back at the hero's side, both the captain and vice captain chase down the plantfolk demi-human. She then screams in terror upon seeing Cruz in his grasshopper form. Meanwhile, Castor faces off against the merman and his army. The merman is jealous of Castor's handsome face and orders one of his subordinates to kill him. The girl charges at Castor, but he easily blocks the attack and ends up charming the girl to surrender. Castor tells the merman that he should be treating women with kindness, and the merman gets triggered. He and his entire army attacks Castor, but they're all easily defeated by Castor's Gemini meteor fist. We transition over to Virgo's fight against the snakefolk demi-human. Virgo uses her intimidate skill, but the snakefolk was able to overcome it. She then attacks Virgo, knocking her down. The snakefolk tells Virgo that she may be at a higher level, but she lacks the will to subdue her opponents. Say notices that Virgo's in danger, but he and the rest of his party are struggling against Sages' fast movements. Say suddenly yells at Virgo to repeat after him. He tells her to shout for help in dealing with a molester, and Virgo obliges. The RV suddenly speeds over and transforms into a humanoid form. Say outs himself as the molester, and grabs onto Sage's. The RV then proceeds to kick both Say and Sage's, knocking them both out. Castor then proceeded to defeat and subdue the rest of the demi-humans, freeing all of the centaurs. Sagittarius and the other heavenly stars suddenly arrive at the village, and Castor asks them what happened. Meanwhile, Ares is still sulking at what had happened. He realized that the other 12 heavenly stars all started out strong, but he, on the other hand, had his power given to him by Lufasu. Dina suddenly appears in front of Ares, and she tells him that Leon went after the other heavenly stars. Ares tells her that he can't do anything to Leon, but Dina refutes his claim, saying that Leon fears Ares the most since his fire will be stronger against more powerful opponents. Ares brings up the goddess's buff that Leon had received, but Dina reassures him since the goddess despises people like Leon. She smiles, saying that Leon is way too conceited and that he's not needed for the goddess. Ares looks over at Dina's evil smile and asks her who she really is. Dina says that she's not important and is someone who's failed to become anyone. She then buffs Ares with her auxiliary heaven magic and tells Ares to go fight. Ares asks Dina what she's going to do, but Dina says she's staying out of everything since she's too weak. Back at the village, Sagittarius revealed that he was actually trying to warn Libra to come to the village so that he could gather the forces that are able to defeat Leon. Scorpius decides to forgive Sagittarius for his betrayal for now, since they need as much help as they can get to defeat Leon. Everyone suddenly feels a massive earthquake as Leon arrives on the scene. He unleashes an attack at everyone, but it was stopped by an attack. Ares arrives on the scene, apologizing for being late. Libra comes up with a strategy. Karkinos will tank Leon's attacks with Virgo and Castor supporting him. Libra and Sagittarius will provide cover fire, while Aegocaros will confuse Leon with illusions and Scorpius would try to poison him. Finally, Ares will be the main player and try to restrain Leon as much as possible. The group executes their strategy, with Libra and Sagittarius launching attacks at Leon. Sagittarius and Scorpius transforms, acting as a shield to Ares. Ares activates his Mezar-theme attack, with support from Castor, Scorpius, and Aegocaros. They create a massive swirl attack, however Leon manages to repel it. The heavenly stars are knocked down, but Ares still jumps in, only to get caught by Leon. Leon decides to finish off Ares, but he is interrupted by an escape attack. Leon is transported into a separate space, and is hit by a morning star attack. The person reassures Ares that he can win, and Ares recognizes the voice to be from Dina. Leon is furious, demanding Dina to show herself, and Ares is shocked that Leon managed to tank that attack. Ares suddenly feels Lufasu's presence, and all of the heavenly stars suddenly received a power boost. It turns out that the 12 heavenly stars, with the exception of Libra, are all capped at level 800 due to the limit of Lufasu's monster tamer skill. However, if Lufasu's level were to increase, then the heavenly stars would get stronger as well. The 12 heavenly stars now all jump up to level 1000. Ares grabs onto Sagittarius's arrow and charges in at Leon. Leon tries to intercept, but is stopped by Scorpius, Aegocaros, and Castor. Karkinos then buffs Ares with his skill Altarf, a skill that only works when he's incapacitated and doubles the attack power of allies. It's explained that Ares has 2 flame skills given to him by Lufasu. Mezar-theme allows him to deal continuous percentage damage by touch, and Hamal is a skill that deals damage equal to half of the target's max HP. The downside is that the skill can only be used when Ares is at level 1000, and that it also has a 24-hour cooldown. However, with all of the skills added alongside with Karkinos' altar buff, will provide a super devastating attack. The attack lands, creating a massive explosion that finally takes down Leon. Scorpius declares that all that's left is to take out Leon's subordinates. Her attack is blocked by Say, and he tells her that the demi-humans have lost their will to fight, and killing them would just be a massacre. Scorpius doesn't care since they're Lufasu's enemies, and she asks Say if he wants to die with them. The pair are interrupted by Leon squirming around in pain, and Libra deduces the cause to be a side effect of the goddess's buff. Scorpius asks if they can do anything about the situation, and Dina randomly pops out of a portal and says no. Libra decides to just put him out of his misery, but Ares is reluctant on killing Leon. Someone suddenly tells the heavenly stars to move aside, and it turned out to be Taurus of the Bull from the 12 heavenly stars. Taurus uses his skill Aldebaran, but Ares holds him back since Leon could die from the attack since he's at 1 HP. Taurus reassures him, saying that Aldebaran is a skill-destroying attack, and that he only destroyed Leon's power. Taurus asks if Lufasu is here, and Ares tells him that she's currently away. Taurus decides to leave since Lufasu is not here, but Scorpius yells at him to stop and explain everything. Virgo asks Castor who Taurus is, and he explains that Taurus is the second monster that Lufasu captured. Ares asks Taurus how he was able to destroy the goddess's power when he wasn't able to 200 years ago, and Taurus explains that he just somehow learned how to do it after training for 200 years. He thinks that the person hiding nearby could probably explain it better, and tears open a rift in space to expose Dina from her hiding spot. He's suspicious since he felt the power of two goddesses in the vicinity, and he asks Dina for her true identity. Lufasu arrives on the scene, where she notices Taurus standing over Dina. She recalls what Parthenos had told her, and how Taurus was the one who sealed the Earth Dragon in Helheim. She concludes that Helheim must be nearby, and so Taurus had come out to check on the situation. Taurus notices Lufasu's presence and greets her. Lufasu informs Taurus to not bully Dina as she's pretty useful, and Taurus agrees to withdraw if the sentiment is actually coming from her. Lufasu is confused by his wording, and Taurus tells her that she was the one who had predicted this situation. He says that everything could all be a part of her calculations, so he has nothing else to say. Lufasu panics, wondering if Taurus was able to tell that her body is currently being occupied by another person. Taurus tells Lufasu that she should take care of her situation first, and that he'll wait for her in Helheim. Lufasu takes a look at Taurus's stats as he walks away, and realizes that they've actually gotten worse. She explains that Taurus is meant to specialize in HP and attack, dishing out high damage while being tanky. Taurus leaves, and Lufasu asks Libra to fill her in on everything. Lufasu praises the 12 heavenly stars after hearing what had happened, and she especially praises Ares for defeating Leon. She then turns to Sagittarius and decides to forgive his actions. However, she still needs to decide on what to do about all the demi-humans. The major nations are all going to be targeting them after what they did, and they have also lost their leader Leon. Lufasu wants to take responsibility for her subordinates, as apparently Scorpius had also injured Draupner's guardian dragon with her poison at one point. Lufasu proposes for the demi-humans to hide out in her tower, but the snake demi-human is unreluctant about abandoning their village. I guess we're just ignoring the fact that they tried to kill the centaur child. Anyways, Lufasu tells the demi-humans that she plans to preserve the entire village. Cruz and Kainiko suddenly objects to helping the demi-humans, and Lufasu asks if they're suggesting to kill the demi-humans. Kainiko panics, and says that the demi-humans have waged war on Draupner, and they simply need proof of their victory. Lufasu figures that she'll just need proof that the demi-humans were all killed. She orders Dina to teleport the entire village to safety, and Lufasu unleashes her solar flare ability. She then creates a massive explosion on the land where the village once was, terrifying everyone. Lufasu asks Cruz and Kainiko if this is satisfactory, and they quickly agree. The other demi-humans look dejected, calling Leon a fool for trying to pick a fight against Lufasu. Sagittarius then has all the demi-humans link hands, as he then teleports everyone away with his arrow. Lufasu asks the rest of her group where Leon is, and Scorpius tells her that he's most likely dead as she had injected him with her poison. Lufasu panics and hurries over to Leon. She quickly orders Dina to heal him, as she then chains him up. Lufasu greets Leon while Leon angrily reminds Lufasu of how she humiliated him, and he challenges her to a fight. Lufasu thinks the most optimal solution would be to just beat him up and reduce his level to 800. However, the inner Lufasu inside her gives her another solution. Lufasu refuses Leon's challenge and tells him that he has already lost to Ares and the other heavenly stars. Leon asks if he's not even worthy of being Lufasu's opponent, and she confronts him about using the goddess's power. Lufasu tells him that she would have praised him if he used the power for her benefit. However, Leon ended up being manipulated by the goddess. If the two of them were to fight now, then it would simply be a fight between her and the goddess since he's just a puppet for her. She thinks to how Bennett Nash had managed to reject the goddess's power and tells Leon that he's not worthy enough to fight her. Lufasu walks away, as her plan was to get Leon to think that he won't get to fight Lufasu if he uses the goddess's power. Meanwhile, in a small space, the goddess observes the entire fight. She's frustrated at how much of a hindrance Lufasu is, and decides to unleash her strongest weapon. She decides to unleash the infinite army to finally eliminate Lufasu once and for all. In a random forest, Terra introduces himself to someone. The person asks him why he came, as they turned out to be the fairy princess Pollux. Terra tells her that he's here to ask about the avatar, and how he'd be able to create it. Pollux asks him what he plans on using it for, and he tells her that he wishes to free the demons from the goddess. Pollux refuses, but Terra is determined. Pollux unleashes her skill Argonautai and summons an army of spirits. She tells Terra that she'll teach him if he can defeat her, as she is revealed to be the other Gemini twin of the 12 heavenly stars. Despite Terra being the son of the demon lord at level 1000, he still thinks that he stands no chance. Pollux's ability Argonautai allows her to summon the souls of deceased heroes and grant them temporary bodies with godlike powers. Pollux can also keep summoning more heroes as long as her SP doesn't run out, and her SP just so happens to be infinite. Terra refuses to give up, as he wants to fulfill the wish of the deceased Mercurius. Pollux then has her soldiers use the skill Soul Succession, which raises the abilities of allies while decreasing those of enemies at the cost of the user's life. Pollux would then immediately resurrect the fallen heroes with her ability. Terra ended up being weakened down to level 300, while Pollux would continue to spam the combination of Soul Succession and resurrecting the heroes again. Terra falls to the ground, and Pollux asks him if he's still going to continue fighting. Terra still doesn't plan on giving up, and Pollux orders her soldiers to knock out, but not kill Terra as to not offend the demon lord. Luna suddenly gets behind Pollux and holds a blade over her neck. Pollux orders her soldiers to stop attacking, and she warns Luna that a level 300 stands no chance against her as she's a level 800. Luna tells Pollux that Terra had theorized that she shouldn't be too powerful as she most likely exchanged her combat power for skills. Pollux tells Luna that she'll be killed if Terra was wrong, but Luna has full trust in Terra. Pollux decides to surrender as their deduction was correct, and she orders her soldiers to heal Terra. Pollux is impressed at Terra's display of skill and reveals that she can only summon the heroic spirits. Her brother Castor is in charge of commanding them, as their skill Argonautai can only reach its full potential when the two of them are together. Pollux converses with Terra about wanting to create an avatar to have a non-demon body in order to avoid the fate of the demons. Terra says that the demons are simply tools created by the goddess to fight against humanity. Mercurius had realized this before anyone else, and pleaded with the demon lord to save Luna. However, he was misled and ended up dying, which causes Terra to not trust the demon lord. However, Pollux reveals that she doesn't actually know how to help, as her skill allows her to create a new body from heavenly magic and deposit a dead soul inside. However, the demons are all made of magic, and she's never even tried to resurrect one. She says that something like fairies have their souls inside their main bodies, but the demons are created from nothing with no souls. However, Pollux says that it's not completely impossible, and tells Terra that she's willing to help them out. She suddenly falls over her chair, as light starts emitting from her body. Pollux tells Terra to quickly take Luna and run, before the goddess takes control of her body. Terra panics upon hearing the news, and flees the scene with Luna. Pollux figures that the goddess is taking action due to Lufasu's plan playing out. She gives the goddess permission to use her body. However, she will not give her memories. Pollux decides to seal her soul so that the goddess can't see her memories and learn of Lufasu's plan. Pollux deducts that if the goddess is possessing her body, then that means Lufasu will be left unchecked. She decides to leave the rest of the situation for Lufasu to solve. Meanwhile, Lufasu plans on heading over to Alhium and joining up with Pollux. Ares talks about how Taurus is in charge of guarding the sealed earth dragon, and Libra says that they'll need to find a substitute for Taurus's job in order to retrieve him. Castor then explains that Pollux would be perfect for the role, as her summoned heroes can substitute in the role of guarding the dragons. Lufasu asks Dina if there was a city on the way to Alhium, so she could send the heroes' party there. and Dina informs her of the martial arts city Regolin. Lufasu glances over at Sagittarius and asks him why he's so quiet. Sagittarius says that he doesn't have the right to join in the conversation, but Lufasu tells him that he can repay her by contributing in the upcoming battle. Lufasu tells Sagittarius to transform into a human form, and the other heavenly stars suddenly start to panic. They closed their eyes and covered up Virgo, while Dina fired water magic over at Sagittarius. Sagittarius of the Archer from the 12 heavenly stars joins the party, showing off his holy Excalibur that's covered up by Dina's water magic. Scorpius attacks Sagittarius and slices off his banana. Lufasu's party arrives at the martial arts city Lejdjarn. Dina explains that the city was founded by one of the 7 heroes, and that it's been passed down to his descendants. The Heavenly Stars offers to destroy the entire city, but Lufasu quickly calls them off. The heroes' party steps out of Lufasu's RV, with them being joined by Sargis, the spider demi-human who had been working for Leon. He had decided to join the heroes' party after Say had saved his life. Lufasu tells Say that she's going to go sightseeing in the city, as she then offers Say a gift. It's a scarlet sword, and Lufasu gives it to Say to make up for Scorpius breaking his weapon. She then orders Libra to find the best inn in the city as she sets off. Say tells his party that they should go find an inn as well. Now take a wild guess what happens next. What do you know? The two parties end up at the exact same inn. Say decides to head out on his own to get some fresh air, as Lufasu decides to play cards with everyone else. That, and the presence of Lufasu's RV confirms to Say that Lufasu is aware of Earth. Say speculates if she had visited Earth while she was sealed, but he quickly dismisses that theory. Say suddenly notices a group of thugs cornering someone in a robe. He rushes in front of the person to protect them, as the thugs all charge at Say. Say thinks back to all the level 1000s that he had encountered, and notes that these thugs are nothing compared to them. He defeats all of them with ease, and he realizes that he had grown stronger. A mysterious man shows up and compliments Say's skill. He steps on one of the thugs' head and crushes it. Say asks him what he's doing to his own friends, and the man laughs at that remark. He says that the thugs are just tools, and that useless tools should just be thrown away. The man suddenly disappears into thin air and strikes Say. Say notices the man's shadow and manages to intercept the next attack. The man gets infuriated and launches another attack at Say. Say is knocked down as the man laughs, and he tells him that he has the power of the invincible hero. Someone in a robe tells the man to stop, addressing him as Deblay. The person tells Deblay that Say is the official hero recognized by the Levantine royal family. Deblay decides to back off, and he tells Say that trying to be an ally of justice comes with a heavy price. Say asks the robed person he rescued if they're okay, and they reveal themselves to be Gantz's daughter Alfie. Now I'm sure all of you remember who Alfie is, but for those who don't, here's a quick flashback.
Flashback.
He tells Say that he has prepared the very best equipment and people to take for his journey. And a mage Alfie, at level 72, and is the top graduate of Suval's Magic Academy. She turned out to also be Gantz's daughter, and she learned some swordsmanship from him.
End of flashback.
Say and Alfie head over to a tavern, and Alfie finds the situation extremely awkward as she had previously abandoned the hero's party out of fear. Say asks Alfie why she was being chased earlier, and she tells him that she had saw something she wasn't supposed to. Alfie asks Say if he's aware of the martial arts tournament being held in the city, and he answers that Cruz had informed him about it. Alfie tells Say that the winner of the tournament will become the hero of the territory, and they'll gain more influence over the royal family if they manage to defeat Lufasu or the Demon Lord, a situation that Say deduces will never happen. Alfie then adds that the Lords, the Speth family, wants their son Deblay to become the hero. Deblay would poison the food of his opponents just to win. It's non-lethal, but it'll prevent them from competing in the tournament. He'll also kidnap any women he likes that he has poisoned, which was what happened to one of Alfie's friends. Alfie had wanted to save her friend, but she was no match for Deblay. She then leaves Say and offers to pay the check as thanks for saving her. Alfie had wanted to ask Say for his help, but she felt like she was unworthy to do so. Say, however, grabs her hand and tells her that he'll help. 10 minutes later, Say manages to gather some reinforcements consisting of Kainiko, Hawkeye, Virgo, and Sargis. Gantz also shows up, which freaks out Alfie. The scene shifts to the tournament, where Debray manages to win his match. He had poisoned his opponent and also bribed the referee to guarantee a victory for himself. He considers everyone else to be his toys, and he had ordered Alfie to supply him with new toys. However, Debray was hindered by Say, irritating him as no one is allowed to defy him. He decides to destroy everything that Say treasures, as he had sent some assassins to go after Say's friends. Debray plans to capture the women from his party and turn them into his new toys. We cut over to a bunch of assassins preparing to launch an attack on Lufasu at the inn. Inside the inn, Lufasu is presented with a bunch of food. Lufasu tries the soup and finds the taste to be terrible. She asks the owner of the inn if he had put sugar inside the soup instead of salt, and the owner quickly apologizes and offers to send it back. The owner then asks Lufasu if she's an adventurer and offers her a commission. Lufasu suddenly notices the assassins outside the inn and tells the owner to wait. She orders Libra to capture the assassins, as they all get brutally taken out. Libra brings over all the assassins and asks for Ego Caros's help with the interrogation. Lufasu then orders Sagittarius to find the background of the person who sent the assassins once Libra extracts their name. Lufasu looks furious, and she explains that she would have shown mercy if it was her when she had first arrived in the world. However, she had started to become more like the real Lufasu ever since the battle with Bennett Nash. She is no longer as kind as she was, as she then asks the owner about his commission. The scene shifts over to the tournament venue, where Say's group is inside the participant waiting room to search for proof of Debray's crimes. Hawkeye suddenly discovers a hidden switch on the wall, which reveals a secret staircase. The group runs into a couple of guards that Sargis takes out. The group arrives at a dungeon that reeks of blood. They open the door and are horrified at the sight of a bunch of women chained up and brutally scarred. Alfie calls out for her friend, Rael, and the girl slowly crawls towards her. Alfie notices the burns on her face and starts to tear up. A voice suddenly says that Rael burned her own face as Debray steps out, saying that Rael had soured his mood. Hawkeye is furious and launches an attack at Debray, who proceeds to disappear into thin air. He then attacks Hawkeye and knocks him down. Debray then strikes Sargis. However, his blade failed to pierce his skin. Sargis notices that Debray's ability does not involve speed, and Debray reveals that he can actually stop time. Alfie finds that hard to believe, since only the goddess is capable of stopping time. Debray answers that this power of his was given from the goddess herself. The goddess had given the sword King Alioth a sacred treasure to defeat Lufasu, and he had entrusted the artifact to one of his companions. That artifact was then passed down to the companion's descendants, and is known as the Ring of Time. Debray finds joy in the group's hopeless expressions, as he then proceeds to stop time with his ring to strike down the entire group. Alfie tells Debray that the ring is what's impressive, not him. Debray becomes furious and attacks Alfie for mocking him. Gantz tries to protect his daughter, but Debray dodges his attack. He laughs and says that they'll never be able to hit him, as Virgo sneaks up behind him. Debray is caught off guard and barely manages to dodge her attack. Hawkeye is shocked that Virgo can see Debray's movement, but Gantz says that she's actually predicting Debray's movements ahead of time, which means that despite how strong the ring is, Debray himself isn't all that powerful. Debray's attendant suddenly holds Say hostage and orders Virgo to stop attacking. Virgo stops attacking, as Debray then strikes her down. He decides to teach her a lesson and launches a fury of attacks at Virgo while Say laments at how weak he is. He starts to think about the golden apple of Lufasu, wanting to gain more power so he could protect everyone. Debray then takes out a knife and tears apart Virgo's clothes. The ceiling suddenly caves in, as both Lufasu and Libra show up on the scene. Lufasu asks the group what they're doing here, and Say asks her the same question. Lufasu answers that she's here for a request from the owner of the inn, when she suddenly notices everyone's injuries. Her face turns stern, freaking everyone out except for Debray, who's confused. She asks Debray if he's the perpetrator, and Debray simply responds by asking Lufasu who she is. He says that even though her attitude is bad, her looks are quite charming, and that he'll make her his toy. Libra asks Lufasu if she can kill Debray, but Lufasu puts that on hold and once again asks Debray if he's behind everything. Debray confirms it, and Lufasu responds by calling him a small fry. Debray gets angry and stops time with his ring. He plans on ripping apart Lufasu's clothes and reaches his hand out towards her. Lufasu suddenly grabs his hand, catching Debray by surprise. Lufasu notices that his ring is what's making him so fast, revealing it to be the sacred treasure Chronos, which has the ability to slow down the entire world for a few seconds upon activation. The item is defective to Lufasu, as she then removes the ring from Debray's hand. Debray yells at her to give the ring back, and Lufasu responds by punching him in the face. Debray is sent flying, but Lufasu catches him by the neck. She tells him to not faint yet, as she's just getting started. Her face terrifies Debray, as he begins to scream about not wanting to be looked down on again like in the past. Time for another unnecessary backstory to justify the villain's actions. We learn that Debray was abandoned in front of a church when he was a baby. He was weak with no magic and was constantly being bullied. However, one day Debray found out that he was actually the son of a noble, and he jumped up and down in joy when he discovered the truth. However, once he entered the life of a nobleman, he was constantly being looked down on for formerly being an orphan. Debray would pretend to be strong so he wouldn't be looked down on, as he begins to tear up and starts to explain his motivations. Lufasu suddenly tears apart his backstory, saying that she doesn't care. Lufasu tells Debray that just because he has a pitiful past, it doesn't mean that his crimes will be forgiven. She then attacks him in every single one of his body parts, reducing him to a smear. And with that, the case has been resolved. The kidnapped victims had all of their scars healed and their memories of the incident erased. Lufasu had also forced Debray's subordinate to promise to make amends to all the victims, as all of the Speth family's crimes have been revealed to the public, causing their nobility status to be removed. Lufasu tells Rael to come back with her to the inn, and she leaves the rest to the hero's party. Say laments at how weak he is, as he didn't even stand a chance against a regular human. He thinks back to the golden apple of Lufasu that could help him reach level 1000. However, he finds that to be too easy, as power that can be obtained too easily can corrupt people. Lufasu takes Rael back to the inn, where she is reunited with the owner. She completes the request of saving the owner's kidnapped lover, and asks for only one thing as a reward. Lufasu wants to taste the cuisine of the inn, said to be the best of the entire city. Lufasu's whole party sits down to feast, and the food gave her memories of her time with the hero's party. Dina suddenly gets up and leaves, telling Lufasu that she's going to go pluck flowers. Lufasu is suspicious, but Castor suddenly gets up as he suddenly feels the presence of Pollux. The party heads outside the city to intercept Pollux. Castor tells Lufasu that Pollux had been tasked with guarding the wood Ouroboros' seal, and that she'd never leave the fairy kingdom. The 12 heavenly stars all feel an unnerving presence of something dangerous approaching. Lufasu explains that she had Virgo stay behind in the inn as she was too weak, while Dina still hasn't returned from plucking flowers. Lufasu then casts her divine barriers, the anti-magic barrier Heliosphere, and the physical attack blocking barrier Heliopause. Sagittarius then uses his skill Esquila in combination with Lufasu's skill, Enchant Ray. Esquila causes any single target skills to apply to all targets, while Enchant Ray increases the attack and defense of one single ally. The preparation for the upcoming battle is complete, as the entire group looks up at the dark and ominous sky. Lufasu spots a figure in the sky, and Ego Karos identifies them as Terra. He asks Lufasu for permission to dispose of him, but she tells him to stand down. Terra drops to the ground, with Luna crying over his body. Luna begs Lufasu to spare Terra, but Lufasu isn't really willing to. Luna tears up and tells Lufasu that she'll do anything. Someone suddenly calls out to Lufasu, as Pollux and an army of hero spirits along with the Dragon King Ladin appear before the group. Lufasu realizes that the girl is not Pollux, and the girl confirms that she's just borrowing Pollux's body. She then orders her hero spirits to kill Terra, but Lufasu stops the attack. She reminds Luna of her promise, as she then identifies the person possessing Pollux to be the goddess Selevanus. Lufasu uses her skill Alcade, which increases her level to 1500, while the heavenly stars have their levels increased to 1000. Lufasu uses her skill Excols, which allows skills to fuse together. Scorpius unleashes her poisonous breath Graphius, paired with Sagittarius's never-missing arrow Alnisil, which combines together with Libra's Brachium attack. Ares and Ego Keros combines their two attacks Mesartheme and Deneb Argidi. Karkinos then uses his skill Esquila, which turns single-target attacks into all-target attacks, and pairs it up with Sagittarius's Acubans attack. Ego Keros and Castor then groups all the enemies inside a swirl, as the spirit heroes all got decimated by all the combined attacks. However, Alevinus then immediately revives the army with her Argonautai skill. Lufasu then steps forward, praising the heavenly stars for their effort. She uses her weapon, Prophet with Golden Bow, and unleashes her solar flare attack on the entire army. The spirit heroes all get destroyed, as the attack pierces through the entire solar system. Lufasu tells Alevinus that she can't defeat her, and Alevinus agrees. However, she reminds Lufasu that there were heroes in the past that have managed to defeat her. Alevinus uses her Argonautai skill again, and she summons the 4 members of the 7 heroes that have passed away. The Beast King Dubhi, the Adventurer King Fekta, the Blacksmith King Mezer, and the Sword King Alioth. Alevinus laughs, wondering if Lufasu is able to defeat the heroes, as a mysterious girl that's totally not Bennett Nash observes the fight from a distance. On the battlefield, Lufasu faces off against the Dragon King Ladin, alongside the other 4 heroes, all of them at level 1000. Lufasu is struck by Alioth's blade, which actually causes her to bleed. Lufasu uses one of her feathers to tear apart Alioth's head and dodges an incoming attack from Ladin. She prepares to strike back at Ladin, however she gets intercepted by Alioth. Lufasu suddenly gets a glimpse of Alioth's face in the past, which throws her off guard. Scorpius, Ego Keros, and Ares gets enraged upon seeing the heroes, which causes the coordination of the heavenly stars to fall apart. Libra and the rest of the heavenly stars that are still sane heads over to support Lufasu. However, Alevinus summons another army of heroes to intercept them. The coordination of the party is completely gone, with Lufasu facing off against Ladin and Alioth, Libra, Sagittarius, Castor, and Karkinos facing off against the hero army, and Sagittarius, Ares, and Scorpius facing off against the other 3 heroes. The 12 heavenly stars are overwhelmed, and Lufasu wants to go help them out. She figures that she'll just have to quickly eliminate Alioth and Ladin. However, she suddenly gets a flash of memories of Alioth in the past. Lufasu ends up hesitating to kill Alioth, which confuses her. She realized that the real Lufasu is vulnerable to those she's grown attached to, which explains why she lost to the 7 heroes in the past. Ladin suddenly launches an attack at Lufasu, which could result in Midgard being wiped out, forcing Lufasu to take the attack head-on. Meanwhile, Ares gets completely thrashed around by Dubhi. Someone suddenly saves Ares by knocking Dubhi away, and the person turned out to be Leon. Back to Lufasu, she summons her sword and unleashes her skill Quick Raid, a skill that reduces attack power for landing continuous hits to fight against Alioth. Lufasu is confident that she'll be able to push back Alioth. However, she is hit by memories of the past again and ends up being defeated. Ladin then stomps on her, and Lufasu barely manages to hold back his foot. Lufasu is left vulnerable as Alioth charges in for another attack. Someone suddenly attacks both Alioth and Ladin, saving Lufasu. A girl stood over Lufasu, reminding her that she'll personally beat her up if she were to lose to anyone. The girl is none other than the vampire princess Bennett Nash, which I'm sure none of you expected. We flash back to Bennett Nash waking up after having been killed by Lufasu. Her subordinates barged into her room and tells Bennett Nash that Lufasu had healed her with the Amrita elixir that is capable of healing any wounds. Bennett Nash realized that Lufasu knew that she'd survive, yet was still going along with Bennett Nash's heartfelt last words. Bennett Nash becomes flustered and kicks out all of her subordinates. Back in the present, Bennett Nash shows disgust to the spirits of the heroes. She said that they kept crying about the mistake they had made 200 years ago. However, they're still repeating the same mistake in the present. Bennett Nash declares that she'll personally send all the spirits back to hell and engages Alioth in combat. She notes that it feels off and proceeds to overpower him. Dubhe then charges at her, but Bennett Nash blocks his attack, once again stating that it fell off. She then flings Dubhe away and engages both Mezer and Fekta. She finds the feeling off as well and punches both of them to smithereens. The heroes are revived, but Bennett Nash simply defeats them all again. Bennett Nash becomes enraged at how weak the heroes are, stating that they're not even worth her time. She's furious at how weak the heroes have become and starts to pummel them one by one, starting with Alioth, who in the past would have been able to cut off her arm and carved her from her shoulder to her torso. She then attacks Dubhe, who was able to split the land and shatter her arm in the past. Her next victim was Fekta. His arrows in the past were strong enough to pierce through the Dragon King's body. Finally, there's Mezer, who despite having the technology, is lacking the will and innovation he had in the past. Bennett Nash tells all the heroes to disappear from her sight and raises her level up to 1500. Lufasu suddenly holds her back and informs Bennett Nash that the hero spirits are unkillable. Bennett Nash decides to seal them with her Luna tentacle skill instead, as memories of their shared past enters her mind as she watches the situation unfold. Back at the 12 Heavenly Stars, Leon had just saved Ares from the hero spirits. He then starts to fight the other spirits, and the Heavenly Stars are confused as to why he's helping them. Sagittarius asks if they should intervene, but Libra tells him to hold off on that, as Leon would most likely attack them for intervening in the fight. Leon mows through all the hero spirits, and Ares is confused at how weak the spirits are even though they're all at level 1000. Libra answers that the spirits have no coordination, and Castor explains that it's because the Argonautai skill is currently incomplete. Argonautai can only show its full potential with both Castor and Pollux. Pollux would summon the spirits while Castor would command them. Ares observes how easily Leon is destroying the spirits and has a look of admiration. Libra then informs Aegocaros to restrain the spirits to prevent them from being revived. Leon then transforms into his level 1000 Nemean lion form and engages Ladin in combat. Before Lufasu showed up, both Leon and Ladin were among the 4 strongest individuals in Midgard, and they're now about to face each other for the first time in history. They attack each other, as Ares cheers on from the sidelines. Meanwhile in the city, Say, Virgo, and the rest of the party are having tea as the battle wages on in the background. Say is surprised at how relaxed everyone is, and Gantz explains that there's no point in panicking as there's pretty much nothing they can do anyways. Say feels like they can at least try calming down the crowd, but Virgo says that it wouldn't really do anything as the whole town is in chaos. The scene shifts to Luna over at the battlefield, where she tries to shield Terra from the attacks. Lufasu suddenly gets in front of her to shield her, and she tells Luna to not needlessly sacrifice herself. Lufasu places Luna and Terra in a force field, and Luna is confused as to why Lufasu is prioritizing her and Terra over the 12 heavenly stars. However, she looks over and sees that everyone else is just calmly observing the battle, making her feel like an insect compared to them. Lufasu asks Alovinus if she has any other tricks up her sleeve, as Ladin is occupied with Leon, while the hero spirits have all been restrained. The goddess simply smiles, as Lufasu declares that she'll crush anything the goddess throws at her. We get a flashback of Pollux's past, where she had given a hero a divine sword to defeat the Demon King with. This incident took place thousands of years ago, where a hero had risen up to defeat the Demon King. Pollux had given the hero a legendary weapon along with the Demon King's weakness and sent him on his way. Pollux suddenly begins to cry, wondering why no one would question how convenient everything is. Everything is part of a script. The hero would be placed in the first town with only weak beings to help him grow stronger, and the fairy princess would conveniently know about the Demon King's weakness. No one is aware that all the Demon Kings throughout history are all the same entity, while the fairy princess would simply be sending the heroes to their doom. Pollux can't bear having to kill any more people, and considers taking her own life to end it all. She was stopped by Castor, who comforts her as she cries. Castor wonders why the goddess is doing this to them. Pollux is too kind to continue with this role. Castor wants to take over Pollux's position, but he's not allowed to as he is inferior to Pollux. All he can do is pray that someone will tear apart the goddess's script. Thousands of years pass, and Lufasu suddenly shows up in the forest. Pollux is terrified upon seeing Luface's level at 4,200, which is past the limit set by the goddess. She asks Lufasu if she needed anything from her, and Lufasu answers that she's here to tame the two siblings. Pollux is caught off guard at the fact that they're being treated like monsters, and Lufasu responds that the two of them have the right to resist with all their might. Pollux and Castor unleashes their Argonautai skill, but Lufasu demolishes it with a single strike. Lufasu uses her intimidation skill and gets close to Pollux's face. She reminds Pollux about the burden she had to carry on and tells Pollux that she'll soon no longer have to send anyone to their deaths. Pollux cries tears of joy upon hearing her words and takes Lufasu's hand. Back in the present, Alovinus uses the Argonautai skill to summon Uranus, the primordial celestial wings, who Lufasu easily defeats. The goddess then summons Aeneas, the progenitor of humans and the guardian of the sacred realm, who Lufasu easily defeats, while telling him to put some clothes on. Lufasu explains that the guardians of the sacred realm have their powers passed down from generation to generation, making the current Aeneas powerless as his power is currently held by Parthenos. The goddess decides to unveil her trump card and summons a hero from another world. The person turned out to be a boxer, and Alovinus adds that the boxer had introduced English to this world. She said that Karkinos had picked up bits of that language, which triggers Lufasu and causes her to take out the boxer in a single punch. Alovinus then decides to summon Mars from the 7 luminaries to fight Lufasu, and the result of the battle is the exact same as their first encounter. Alovinus turns to Ladin as a last resort. However, it turns out that Bennett Nash had interrupted his fight with Leon and killed him. Lufasu tells the goddess to leave Pollux's body, but she refuses and asks Lufasu if she has what it takes to attack her body. She's right, as there's really nothing Lufasu can do to get Alovinus out. Castor suddenly chimes in and tells Pollux not to lose. He reminds her of their dream to finally break free of the goddess's script, which motivates Pollux to try and resist the goddess's control. Lufasu suddenly remembers someone's words and summons Ixgate to call upon Taurus of the 12 heavenly stars. Taurus arrives and unleashes his skill Aldebaran, which has the ability to shatter the goddess's power. The goddess vanishes as all the spirits begin to disappear as well. Taurus leaves the scene and tells Lufasu that she's starting to become more like her old self. Lufasu realizes that it's most likely a side effect of using the Alkate skill. She then watches as the heroes fade away, and she hopes to meet the real ones next time. The other half of the Gemini, the fairy princess Pollux, of the 12 heavenly stars, joins the party. The battle is finally over, but Lufasu notes that the goddess's fragment that they fought was not even as powerful as a single strand of her hair. The day after the battle, Dina never ends up returning and mysteriously vanishes without a trace. The day after the battle, all parties gather together in the largest room in the inn inside the city. Lufasu confronts Terra, who says that he no longer wishes to fight against humanity after learning of the truth about the demons. Lufasu feels the main character archetype from him that completely overshadows Sei, and it kind of irritates her. Cruz asks Lufasu why she isn't striking down the son of the Demon King, and she tells him that the current her is not as merciless as she was in the past. Lufasu realized that the old Lufasu was far too merciless, which was what truly led to her downfall. She then asks Libra if she has found Dina, and Libra responds that Dina appears to have left the city. Dina's name is unfamiliar to Pollux, and Libra takes out a picture of her to show. Pollux snatches the picture and panics upon seeing the image. She tells Lufasu that Dina is actually the goddess's avatar. Her outfit is different, but her appearance is the exact same as Alovinus's. Pollux then adds that Dina is also responsible for sealing away Lufasu, as Pollux had spotted her alongside the 7 heroes 200 years ago when Lufasu was being sealed. Pollux asks Lufasu why she even allowed Dina to be her strategist despite knowing that Dina had been lying about her identity, and Lufasu simply responds that she had wanted to just let Dina do her thing. Pollux calls Lufasu an idiot, and Bennett Nash realizes that the idea of having a subordinate with ulterior motives had intrigued Lufasu. Lufasu is annoyed that Bennett Nash was spot on with her analysis, and she couldn't believe how stupid she was being. Pollux is frustrated at the 12 heavenly stars just blindly following Lufasu, and Aegocaros starts to go on a rant about Lufaisu's words being absolute. Pollux quickly cuts him off and says that the purpose of the 12 heavenly stars is to make up for Lufaisu's flaws. Pollux tells Lufaisu that she'll be in charge of managing her actions from now on and forces Lufaisu to comply. Castor observes Pollux's mood and smiles due to how much happier she is compared to the past. Terra realizes that if Dina/Venus was the goddess's avatar, then something must be up with his father as well. Scorpius and Aegocaros are furious at being deceived by Dina, while Castor and Ares notes that Dina didn't really seem like a bad person. Lufaisu determines that there are now 4 things they need to do. First is to search for Aquarius of the 12 heavenly stars. Second is to locate Pisces of the 12 heavenly stars. Third is to figure out how the demon race are reincarnated into the fairy race. Finally is to track down Dina. Libra decides that the party needs to split up into 4 teams. The first team is consisted of Pollux, Castor, Virgo, Terra, and Luna, who are in charge of investigating the demon race's reincarnation. The second team is consisted of Libra, Aries, and Carcinos, tasked with locating Aquarius. The third team is consisted of Libra, Sagittarius, and Aegocaros, tasked with searching for Pisces. Finally, is the team in charge of tracking down Dina, which consists of only Lufaisu. Lufaisu tells Say that the hero's party should just do what he thinks is best. Her plan is to have his unpredictability of being from another world come in clutch. Lufaisu had decided to search for Dina alone as she wants to spend time talking to her. Despite Dina being the goddess's avatar, Lufaisu just can't think of her as an enemy after everything they've been through. Bennett Nash suddenly interjects, reminding Lufaisu of her existence. Lufaisu is surprised that she wants to come, and Bennett Nash responds that she'll be bored just waiting around in Mjolnir. And with that, the vampire princess of the 7 heroes, Bennett Nash, joins the party. Pollux and Castor then activates their fusion skill, flagship of the heroic spirits, and summons the flying Argo ship. Lufaisu stares in awe at the giant Argo ship, and Castor introduces her to the crew of the ship that consists of hero spirits. Lufaisu's group heads off on the ship, while the heroes' party goes a separate route, using Lufaisu's RV. The group first stops at Alfheim to drop Pollux's group off at the fairy realm. Their next destination is located outside of human territory and inside the demon's territory. It's Muspelheim, the location of Aquarius, who is tasked with guarding one of the elemental dragons. The plan is to drop Ares's group off there, along with some hero spirits to take over Aquarius's role of guarding the dragon. The 2 hero spirits are the Hydra of the Cursed Tides and the Phoenix of the Sacred Flame, 2 monsters who had swore loyalty to Lufaisu after being captured 200 years ago. The ship enters the demon territory, and Libra warns everyone to be ready for a confrontation from the demons. An army of demons notices the Argo ship, and they announce to Lufaisu that each one of them is as strong as the 7 luminaries. Lufaisu easily defeats the entire army, and the demons finally realized her true identity. Lufaisu decides to let the demons live with 1 HP for the sake of Terra. The Phoenix and Hydra starts to praise Lufaisu while berating the other person, causing them to get into a dispute. The Phoenix tries to drag Ares into the fight, but Scorpius and Sagittarius tells him to not intervene. Sagittarius still has Dina's water magic covering him, and Bennett Nash asks Lufaisu for permission to kill him. Lufaisu tells her that she can leave him half dead, and Bennett Nash goes ahead and slices off Sagittarius's banana. Libra informs Lufaisu that they've arrived at Muspelheim, and Lufaisu explains that Muspelheim is a blazing continent that's forever engulfed in flames. However, the land weirdly appears to be frozen. Libra speculates that Aquarius is behind this as her attribute is water, but Lufaisu feels like it seems more like ice rather than water. Ares's group prepares to leave, but Lufaisu tells them to hold on. She then provides the entire group with new equipment and winter gear. Lufaisu then pats Ares on the head, making Scorpius jealous. Lufaisu reluctantly pats Scorpius on the head as well, which turns her on. The group heads into Muspelheim, where the Phoenix is distraught by all the ice while the Hydra is overjoyed by it. Carcinos suggests heading to the inn in the nearby town, but both Scorpius and Ares would rather just storm the castle to drag out Aquarius. However, Karkinos tells the two that they shouldn't cause any unnecessary trouble, and the group manages to find an igloo-shaped tavern inside the town. The tavern keeper doesn't seem to recognize the group, and Karkinos tells him that they're travelers. The tavern keeper is impressed that there are travelers in the demon territory, and he introduces the place is called Nectar, which was once known as the Blazing Land Muspelheim. The tavern keeper reminds the group about how the humans lost to the demons 200 years ago. Some people fled the land, while some decided to stay behind. However, the land fell under the demons' control, causing lots of people to be killed. When all hope was lost, Aquarius suddenly appeared and froze the entire land along with the demons. The people swore loyalty to Aquarius and was granted protection and the town. Karkinos thanks the tavern keeper for the information and pays him with a giant gemstone. The tavern keeper says the payment is too much, so Karkinos decides to bargain for an additional piece of information. He asks the tavern keeper how they'd be able to meet the queen, Aquarius. The tavern keeper is confused, since Aquarius is a man, and Karkinos quickly apologizes for his mistake. The tavern keeper then answers that the group would only be able to meet Aquarius if they achieve something great. Something like defeating the demon race attacking from the outside town, or taking down their leader, Pluto. Pluto is the leader of Pluto Town, a city located around 500 kilometers from Nectar, with the land area being greater than all of humanity's living zones put together. Aquarius is unable to leave Nectar for some reason, making him unable to go and stop Pluto. We cut over to Pluto Town, where all the demon residents are panicking. It turns out Ares' group is attacking the town, as Pluto observes the city being destroyed, accepting defeat. Ares then proceeds to kill him, and the entire city gets destroyed. The next day, Ares' group is summoned to the castle to meet Aquarius for their achievement. Aquarius offers to give the group whatever they want, and Scorpius asks to meet the real Aquarius, referring to the boy as a stand-in. The boy says that he is Aquarius, but Scorpius quickly cuts him off and says that they're searching for the water-bearer and not the courier. She refers to the boy as Ganymedes, and Ganymedes suddenly recognizes the group. He agrees to let the group meet Aquarius out of fear, and it turns out he's a level 600 monster tasked with carrying the cup of Aquarius. The group walks up to a giant cup, and the person inside recognizes the group's voices. It turned out to be Aquarius, the water-bearer of the 12 heavenly stars, asking the group why they came to seek her out. Ares tells Aquarius that Lufasu has returned, so the group is here to bring her back. However, Aquarius tells them to wait, as now is not a good time. She says that she is currently guarding the fire dragon, who in every 20 years would send out its fragment during its slumber and wander around. The fragment would burn everything in its path, so Aquarius is unable to leave until this issue is resolved. Aquarius notices the Phoenix and Hydra, and says that the two of them are unable to handle the situation. Karkinos tells Aquarius that the whole group will help out, and she smiles while accepting their assistance. The group heads down to the ice prison way below Nectar, where the gigantic fire dragon is slumbering. Scorpius notes that the dragon's snout is larger than her true form, as the dragon's humanoid avatar is seen wandering around the area. Aquarius uses her Sedacpia skill to give the whole group an evasion boost, as they then engage the avatar in battle. The Phoenix and Hydra charges in, but the avatar easily tanks their attacks. It then gets up close and slams them both to the ground. The two of them are surprised that they got hit, despite having an evasion boost from Aquarius, as the avatar then prepares to finish them off. Karkinos suddenly gets in front of the attack and intercepts it with a cubans. Aquarius warns the group of the avatar's attacks, as they appear to be unavoidable. Ares joins the battle, as he notes that the avatar is the pinnacle of the fire element, while he is the weakest. However, he's not afraid, as he trusts the power given to him by Lufasu. Ares engages the avatar in close combat, when Scorpius suddenly intervenes and poisons the avatar with her Shala skill. Aquarius then launches shards of ice with her Freeze Duster skill, as Karkinos then activates his Ocellus Borealis skill. The skill pulls the spirit in towards him, as he then unleashes his Acuban skill. The spirit is knocked down, and Aquarius tells Ares to finish it off. Ares thinks back to what Dina had told him, and how his fire will get stronger the enemy is. He unleashes his Mezar theme attack, and the avatar perishes with a smile on its face. The group emerges victorious. However, Aquarius is suspicious at the fact that the avatar that has no will was smiling upon being defeated. The fire dragon is still asleep, which eases her suspicions, as Scorpius ushers her to leave already. The group leaves the area as the fire dragon suddenly opens its eyes. Meanwhile, over at Alfheim, someone confronts Pollux's group, saying that he's here to wake up the wood dragon slumbering in this land. Terra is shocked, as the person's level is supposed to be 300. The person introduces himself as Soul of Heaven of the Seven Luminaries, whose level is somehow sitting at 1000.